Why was the microphone muted? Sorry for the delay, everyone. OBS has just been an absolute disaster today. I don't know what on earth took place. And now I need to fix the camera, because now it's back to... There we go. And now it's not laggy anymore. Now the frame rate's back up. Good God, this is an absolute disaster. All right. I think we're good. I think everything actually works. That's amazing. Okay. Alright, so here's what happened. I start OBS. Everything's working fine. I haven't turned off my computer since last night. Everything should be identical. We streamed last night. It was an awful stream, but we streamed. And everything worked. Started up now. Everything seems to be working, and then I'm noticing, wait a minute, there's no desktop audio. What's going on? And I was fighting with this thing for like an hour. And it turned out that my microphone, for whatever reason, my microphone in particular, unless I opened OBS in administrator mode, if my microphone, which I have my headset plugged into, was my default audio source, or my default output device, it couldn't detect it. It's been able to detect it for the entirety of the time I've had this microphone, but it couldn't detect it. So I reinstalled OBS, so all of those settings, like the camera settings and whatnot, for some reason, reset. And just, oh my god. I don't know what happened. Oh, the dog upstairs is barking really loudly. Anyways, sorry for the delay. That took an insane amount of time. Why waste time on what else? Let this get out of here. This is a political science channel. He's a bad political scientist. Like a really, really bad one. Or a historian, or whatever he fancies himself. Because it's funny, that's why. OBS obviously broke something exactly. Rick, thank you, by the way, for the $2 and for, I saw you got donated a number of memberships. I appreciate that. OBS didn't want to cover what default test, and I don't blame him. Alright. Let's get this show on the road. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, great. And that now has to get recut. Why does that always have to get recut? I spend, like, a minute almost every single stream, like, retrimming this. It's like, I don't know if it's OBS or if YouTube is just constantly rescaling their video size? Which it shouldn't be, right? That doesn't make sense. Okay, well, anyways. Let's do 90. No, not 190. 90. There we go. 100. 20. Yeah, there we go. That works. All right. And just for the hell of it, let's get Stellaris going in the background on AI mode. We can just see where it goes. That way we get the benefits of the strategy gaming visual. But at no point do I actually have to take my eyes off of the what if of this video, and we are focused. I think that's a good plan. I tried streaming once, it was awful. It is awful. I like video essays. I miss doing video essays all the time. That's why I'm doing more of them recently. Why does President Sunday, the larger political scientist, simply eat what if ultist? There's a couple of reasons. First of all, hygiene directly corresponds to education, and he's an idiot. So I don't want to put any part of that in my mouth. The second, unfortunately, is I can't. If that was a viable option, you know, we'd treat it as a last resort, but we would weigh it to be sure. All right. Now I think. Yes, perfect. Here we go. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll put this down here, and we'll just kind of, screw it. We'll just put it in the background like this, and we'll just let that go. We'll let that go at top speed. This is fully automated, so I am not actually a player character in this universe at all. Let's see. Let's root for Solarum Prime. What is this? Oh, I can't even communicate with it. Of course. Whatever. Anyways, we'll just watch this madness. We'll just turn everything on. All right. Let us begin. What an awful day so far. All right, this is What If Ultist on the coming far-right backlash.
The history of the world moves by pendulum. There is progress, which is why we aren't giant toads living in salty tidal pools anymore.
It's not a toad. History moves by pendulums. What?
The history of the world moves by pendulum. There is progress, which is why we aren't giant toads living in salty tidal pools anymore.
Okay, so we are seconds in. We have a statement about the history of the world moving by pendulums. And then his immediate point of reference is an irrevocable gestalt shift in evolutionary history in particular. So that's just wrong by his own lights. That's weird.
But it's nowhere near to a straight path, with countless ups, downs, and countervening.
Think you should have the TNO mod for HOI4 playing for more authenticity of the subject of the video? Yeah, I agree, but I didn't have it installed. Or do I? Do I have it installed? I might have it installed. I'll do that next time. That's a good idea, though. Yeah.
Directions. History does move in a direction, but I can swear that it's not one that you...
What is this? Egyptian prime symbol, the path, ecological origin, the Nile River. What is this? Prime symbol, all-devouring cosmic cycle, Mesoamerican. Mesoamerican isn't just like one culture. Western European American prime symbol, infinite space. What is this? What am I looking at here? What is this thing?
Or even I can really understand. One of the modern left's favorite phrases is that they are on the right side of history.
Literally nobody fucking says this. Who says this?
However, what if I were to tell you that that wasn't true? that the next 2 decades belong to the very opposite group, the far right.
Yeah, Dugan is somebody I have to prepare for. I'm probably going to do like a more thorough read-through of Dugan when I do my video on criticizing organic. Analyze this image. Oh, fuck you, Brooks. Fine, I'll analyze the image. Thanks for the $2. Wait, you're gonna make me put in that kind of work, and that's all you're donating? Good God, he's actually bought me video games and stuff before, so we'll indulge him this time. Sorry, as I was saying, I'm probably gonna go more into Dugan when I do my critique of sort of organic analogies for states. But yeah, okay. We're looking at this image apparently. What are we looking at here? 2400 BC. I don't know what that is. There's a thing down there. Is that a tablet? Is that a river? Is this the highest resolution? That is. I don't know what this... There's a circle thing here. So at some point after, I guess 600 BC, we invented a circle thing. Here, let's zoom this in, so you can drink in the majesty of this. So, I assume this is like, this is between... Wait a minute. No, sorry, that's 0. So, like, I want to say like 380, we invented a plaque, a clock, a watch, little bead things. I don't know what a chessboard and a pen. We got a pen. We got a microscope. I don't know what this thing is. So in the 1600s, we invented the towering cube. Then we have cars. I'm assuming that's a stereo. Indistinguishable box. A balsa wood model airplane. Is that like a hard-boiled candy? Okay, I hate you, Brooks. I hate you for this so much. No, we're not analyzing this anymore. This analysis is over. We are pressing on.
Right. From looking at the patterns in history and trends, I believe that the pendulum will swing back in the other direction for the next few decades. Although I myself am a right-winger, it would be a lie for me to say I'm not terrified for how far the pendulum might go in the other direction. For many of you, this will shatter your conception of the universe, and I'm excited to see what the comments are for this video. Well, why are we wasting time? Let's get started.
Check server notes. What's in server notes? You mean stream notes. Thoughtful Wanderer, the singularity of proof. Oh, okay, so Brooks found the source. What the hell is this? Here, let me get the website thing up. Wait, where's the website? Oh, why is it under game capture? Oh, there we go, okay. The singularity of proof. What is this? Transcendingbiology.wordpress.com. The current belief about technological improvements is that they exist on a linear scale. That if all the major inventions in human history were to be plotted on a graph relative to the year they were invented, the line connecting those plots would be straight. Technological advancement, most think, is a gradual climb upwards. However, observations made in the last 50 years, contradict the idea of a gradual technological advancement, substituting instead the belief that technology improves exponentially over time. That if all the major inventions in human history were plotted on a graph relative to the year they were invented, the line would curve upwards at an exceedingly sharper rate. Moore's Law. So, this is interesting, but I guarantee you he just ripped this from Google, so we're not reading something that Whatifaltist is making use of. The low resolution sort of belies that. So if I click on this, the resolution's still shit, honestly. Anyways, pressing on.
There's a lot going on in the world right now, and
What have we got here? We got a bunch of books. Is this, The Secular Age is actually pretty decent.
would be great to try and understand some of it, but it frequently feels difficult to find the time to read or study in daily life. Thankfully, Blinkist has what...
Oh my god. The pond.
We're all strangers...
Wait, is he using the... Okay, that's not exactly the Evangelion font. You can't use that. I stole that first.
We're all strangers to the world we live in. That since we're so familiar with our current time, that we have no frame of reference for what's strange, wrong, and all that, since we don't know what makes us special. We're fish in a pond that have never seen the outside world, and even more so, the bodies of those fish are mostly made up of water of the pond they live in the same way we make up and cannot be separated from the era of history we live in, the culture we live in, and all that. Thus, it's incredibly funny to see the left portray itself as the rebels and the little guy. Well, in fact, they are the ruling class today. In the modern West...
The left is the ruling class today. I see. Fascinating.
To the left is the establishment. You can easily see this in that Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, and Donald Trump have all had legal action taken against them.
Because Donald Trump tried to pay off someone with campaign funds, and Andrew Tate is accused of human trafficking. Did Jordan Peterson have legal action taken against him? I'm not familiar with this. Hang on. Jordan Peterson... legal action. I mean, I think Wilfrid Laurier University wanted to dismiss him and strip him of his psychologist license, but that's not legal action.
While there's no left-wing equivalent. In my own story, YouTube has removed my videos on completely innocuous educational topics like American regional cultures or Southeast Asian anthropology, without telling me why. The conservative satire site The Babylon Bee has this really funny segment about how a very large amount of American conservative leaders have been kicked off Twitter, but at the same time, people like Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, lots of officials for the Chinese Communist Party, which is committing genocide, as well as even Vladimir Putin's Russian government Twitter account have maintained, showing a clear ideological bias. The dominant social institutions of academia...
That's not a bias in favor of lefties, though, if Putin's still on.
The media, Hollywood, most of the news, the bureaucracy, large parts of social media, growing parts of the military, the largest corporations and defense...
What am I looking at here? Far left/liberal. Far left/liberal is not the same thing. Sargon of Akkad is a liberal.
Contractors, significant parts of religious institutions, in the United States, the presidency, and large parts of the legislature are run by left-wingers, and often very radical ones at that. Although the right occasionally wins elections, the left runs every major institution in society. The quote-unquote rebels and oppressed now run society. As befits...
Some words Stanford, an extremely prestigious university, found offensive. Child prostitute, child who has been trafficked. Well, yeah, because you're identifying a child who has been trafficked and forced into an abusive situation as a prostitute. That's not cool. Circle the wagons, take a defensive position. These are, instead of half-breed, use person of multiple... Why would you ever use half-breed in a conversation.
Entrenched elite, they crack down on dissent and try to spread their ideology. They have tried to turn every movie, TV show, all art, classes in school and university, and
Yes, the left TM is responsible for HBO. The left owns HBO, people. That's...
every other output for human thought into their propaganda. If you can't see this,
I don't think half-breed is a microaggressive term. Half-breed is like something that J.K. Rowling would recognize.
already, you don't want to see it, or you're old enough to be detached from the main part of the society. As said before, they silence those that disagree with them and have ever-increasing standards of purity used to instill fanaticism in their ranks. This has been the way the world has been since the 1960s, and people often don't realize how much of a
Here's an interesting story. So I'm reading Karl Polanyi's Polanyi. I keep wanting to say Karl Polanyi, but it's Polanyi, right? Polanyi. I'm reading The Great Transformation. Karl married a socialist. Karl got a station at a American university, I think Harvard. Karl had to live in Canada because, as a result of anti-communist sentiment, he couldn't get a visa for his wife. So he had to travel from Canada to the United States every single day just to get to work. Why is this spitting water on me? What the hell? Is it like raining outside? What's going on here? Stop that. Yeah. You do not go from being persecuted by the government to such an extent that on ideological grounds you can be prevented from even entering the country to ruling the country within 10 years. That's insane. That's insane. The Great Transformation, that's the book.
shift it's been. Our society had a series of massive social shifts that occurred in the 1960s, which I think are on the same degree as the rise of Christianity, Islam, or a major world religion. This is include trying to push for total male and female social.
A lot of these don't make sense if you spend more than a single second thinking about them. For example, one, every nation in the world is built off war. How can you just freeze borders? Imagine how broken the world would be if we did that in 1800. What the fuck is he talking about? How can the sexes be equal if women need to have children and men have testosterone and need to be driven to impress women? 3. How can all ethnicities be equal if some have luckier geographies, histories, etc.? 4. How can you decouple sex from babies? If society needs babies to function, and then you get lots of single mothers. This is an adult who is writing this.
Social equality, the decoupling of sex from baby making and leading to free love, the idea of complete racial and ethnic equality, that war is inherently immoral, as is empire building, that all people are equally intelligent and we just need better socializing to create a utopia. This is a big difference in the idea of equity or equal outcomes and equality or legal equality. The sheer demographic power of the baby boomer generation, which in Western countries grew up in the easiest era in history ever, as I talk about in this video, has meant that the 1960s cultural norms have been pushed ever since, and now have reached the point of absurdity. The message that the baby boomers pushed is that judging someone else is the worst thing a person can do, and that humanity is inherently good. Both of which anyone who has studied human...
The baby boomers said that humanity is inherent... Who? The baby boomers are an entire generation. They did not unanimously decide that humanity is inherently good.
nature or the historic record can see as a complete lie. However, since the post-war era was so wealthy, there is no pressure towards telling the truth or having a realistic appraisal of reality, and so people believed what they wanted to believe. Our sense of time is kind of warped to...
I was born in 2001. I can't believe my father spent the majority of his life in a world with the Soviet Union and lived at the same time as Mao Zedong and Nazi generals. Why can't you believe that? That's how time works.
Today. It's easy for people my age to forget the 60s are still in living memory, and the norm in history...
How are you dealing with Contra murdering Vaush? Hope you okay? What do you mean Contra murdered Vaush?
...is for trends to play out over centuries. Thus, we would only start to see the negative cultural results of choices made in the 60s today, since only now we're seeing the people who remember the pre-60s social order dying off. Coding, in my opinion, is really character building, since a single error in the code's logic throws the whole code off. It teaches discipline and focus, and people often fail to realize that the real world...
My brother in Christ, you misspelt Grammarly in your Grammarly ad in one of your videos. I covered this. You also put an extra G in Quigley, and you put the E in the wrong spot. It's Carrol, good job, Quigley. You are not an attentive, focused fella.
...world is often pretty similar. A car needs so many things to work, and a single error can keep it from functioning. Society...
Okay, but you, like me, are not so... It is not as incumbent upon you to be correct. You can be wrong endlessly. Endlessly. And indeed you are. I just wanted to note that for some reason.
Societies are the same, in that a single problem, like a failed military, a terrible economy, a religion that's not compelling, and many more, can doom a society to failure. The way healthy societies view the world is that their traditions are almost like a
This is a picture of Minas Tirith under siege by the orc armies of Mordor. I think. This is not... Or is this from Bloodborne, maybe? I don't know what this is. I don't know what... This is like a fantasy scene. What is this?
...castle against the chaos of the world.
Chaos!
Almost everything new that's attempted fails, and traditions and evolutionary processes mean we can pull on billions of years of our ancestors who have been trying to figure out how to make things work. The problem with most societies is they're incapable of changing out their traditions, dooming their societies to fossilization. However, the most...
What societies are doomed to... What are you talking about? Societies haven't been doomed to fossilization since the earliest recorded societies. That's why in literally every piece of philosophical literature going back to ancient Athens, you have people bemoaning the abandonment of old and established ways.
Successful cultures, for example the West, are able to keep their core identities and then develop institutions like democracies or markets that gradually change out traditions as the world changes so they can keep their vigor as the world...
The battle between... The war between Athens and Sparta was also partially a war of identities. Athens had a particular expansionist, open political ideology that did not maintain a safe status quo. Sparta feared that for a number of reasons. Among other things, like Athens, it was a slave society and relied heavily on the helots, which were the type of people that Athens and Rome as well would rely upon to subvert the strength of the traditional powers in whatever cities they were at war with. This was not a single identity. There were commonalities, but there was no notion of Westernness in any of this. That wasn't maintained. That's an invention. That's new.
Are able to keep their core identities and then develop institutions like democracies or markets that gradually change out traditions as the world changes so they can keep their vigor as the world keeps changing around them. However, as Thomas Sowell has put it, the left has an open view of the world, or that humans are perfectible and can be trained to turn the world into a utopia.
And his source is he made it the fuck up, because Thomas Sowell is a hack who has sold himself as a token. It's actually really gross. That's what Thomas Sowell is. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean the right wing is racist? Look, we're trotting out 95-year-old Thomas Sowell again. Constrained vision. Humans are inherently weak, greedy, irrational, and controlled by their environments, and have to work from this baseline. The unconstrained vision. Humans are inherently good, perfectible, powerful, and capable of rationally fixing problems. Which is interesting because the unconstrained vision adheres to proper grammar and punctuation and spelling, whereas the constrained vision does not. How poetic.
They hold that if there's a disparity in the world, it must stem from someone's conscious judgment. The reality of the world is that inequality is the norm and stems from a variety of reasons, whether geographic, historical, cultural, and so forth. However, the left thinks the only cause of any kind of disparity is someone oppressing someone else. This may sound silly when put in these terms, but it's an incredibly enticing view of the world.
Witness the degeneracy of Western leftist mankind. Like just women just walking around on the battlefield where they don't belong, just boobs just right out there. Unbelievable. Where are we going as a society?
Since it paints the liberators as heroes and abdicates them from any self-reflection and responsibility.
And look, she's standing on top of a bunch of men. Just the left just hates masculinity.
Since they're the good people who are saving the world.
Hey, there's me right there. I've got the hat.
A reasonable person looks at the historic record and uses it to project the future, since the past is the only thing we have, and...
No, they don't. A reasonable person doesn't, actually. That's silly. You can't predict the future. You can't. If you could predict the future, it would beg the question, how on earth did the traditional societies fail or dissolve or change? They'd want to maintain themselves. If predicting the future is a reasonable use of historical material, and not, for example, an attempt to understand the processes by which we got here so we understand what is essential and what is not, well, I guess history is just not very useful then.
Thus, it's the best thing we have to understand the future. This isn't controversial in the sciences, but is in the social sciences.
No, it's controversial in both, actually. Very controversial in both. Case in point, somebody you, I would imagine, would find a lot of common cause with. This is a central thesis of Karl Popper's The Open Society and Its Enemies. He critiques historicists, quote-unquote, who attempt to discern historical rules and try to determine the future on the basis of that.
In humanities. This is since leftists would like to project their religious view of infinite progress that will give them more power, or the moral arc of history.
Inshallah.
In effect, they are substituting a serious study in exchange for a fantasy. However, the changes that have been made since the 60s presupposes a series of assumptions about the world that have never been tested or evaluated.
What chains? You need to, like... What are you talking about? What chains? Are they chains, or did they open stuff up? Which is it? Chains are not typically symbols of openness. You know, like you kind of...
Those that men and women can healthily have the same social roles, that the people pushing these agendas are wise and capable.
No, they can't. You would not survive in the traditional role of a woman in society pre-1960. You would die. I mean, you can't even handle a job where your only responsibility is to slap together documents in MS Paint. You can't spell them correctly, for God's sake.
That there are not long-standing reasons that different ethnicities have different results, that society's structure itself is evil. Pushing this many changes upon a society...
That society structure itself as... That made no sense to me. Why is this so low resolution? You look, you have 500,000 subscribers. This is 7 days old and you have 457,000 views. Hire a goddamn editor. Get somebody else to make your slides. It'll cost you a pittance. This is embarrassing.
Society this fast is not reform. It's suicide. And the people pushing this even say their goal is the complete destruction of the previous.
This is like the platonic form of arrested development. He got too much success early on, never had to grow. He thinks he's a genius, and he's trapped. He's trapped in his own insane little world where it's unreal. This is the most unself-aware person alive. And like, one of the things that's really astonishing about this is you look at this, like 457,000 views, 27,000. And that's not a lot, by the way, of positive. Actually, you know what? Let's, I'm a little bit curious. See dislikes. See dislikes YouTube video. I'm a little bit curious. What is the actual, like, result of this? Only 2,000 dislikes. Now, granted, they don't show dislikes anymore, so people are just not motivated to show them, so 7%. But, like, okay, 27,000 people liked this. There are so many people here who are, like, just glorifying this in the comments. Sadly, I can relate to this video. This was a really good video. Like, these are not people who survive in discussion with the average minimally informed person who is interested in these topics. So I have to assume, or I conjecture rather, that there is a massive audience of people who are only consuming this, who are so completely disengaged that they don't see anything else or talk with anybody else online about this stuff. And that's what's feeding this, because it seems like the actual political space is a really tiny bubble. Like, really tiny. Like, the amount of people who are actually like, consistently engaged in this stuff probably numbers, if I had to guess, like maybe 10,000. Like, it's tiny. And that's like a heady 10,000, mind you. Like, that's a bunch of people who will watch, like, Destiny and Vaush and whatnot pretty consistently, even if they just hate them. But people who actually like talk about this stuff in like a public sense, they must be like who's watching this stuff? This is like the lowest quality video essay material out there, and yet there's like really sophisticated material that's really charming and well put together with actual production values that will just sink. And it's not even a matter of like the charm of the deliverer or their connections or whatever. Like, this guy's videos are outperforming. It's insane. It must just be because he started early. That must be it. Look at his stats on Social Blade, they're abysmal. What do you mean? Let's see. Social Blade. What if Altist? What do you mean they're abysmal? Do you mean like abysmal means he's not succeeding, but he is. He's doing very well. They project he's making up to $166,000 per year. In my experience, that's lowballing it.
Society. However, they fail to tell us what plans they have to replace it, only criticizing the previous culture. However, since their plan has no clear direction...
He's got the audience of people who just want everyone to say that the status quo is great. I don't think so, though, because they're complaining about the status quo. The highest art of warfare... Oh.
Direction, we need them to lead us through this plan. This plan is exactly what the Soviet expert whose job was to destroy non-communist societies, Yuri Bezmenov, said the leftist scheme was. The reality of...
He gets trotted out every few years. He's a hack and he's not important and he's wrong.
History that bounces back and forth. An empire rises, then falls into barbarism, then 400 years later, a scholar uncovers ancient scrolls that allow a renaissance. Sometimes society becomes more liberal, then religious fanaticism. fanaticism rolls over the society when things get more chaotic. History generally does trend towards greater...
He's falling off hard, though. Scroll down. Oh, let's see. All right, let's see. Let's look at it here. Ooh. He is a little bit. Well, he maybe just... It might be that he's capping, right? Like, it might be that the demographics that he appeals to is just... Like, he's just got them all. That's also a possibility. Like, you would expect any channel to stop at some point. 500,000 is not a low stopping point.
Complexity and advancement, but it's unclear if it will do that over the next 1,000 years or if we're facing another dark age. However, an order based on rebelling against non-order cannot survive. What was harmless rebellion among teenagers in the 50s has now become an all-consuming vortex. The left's lack of sense of stability dooms their movement. I've spent this video so far ripping into the left, but as this video will show, I am long-term more worried at the reaction that could come from this. The left is so detached from reality.
Yeah, this is called the perversity thesis. This is what Albert Hirschman talks about in the rhetoric of reaction. And it's the argument that I agree with your ends, leftists, but the methods you are using, they will result not just in failure, but in the opposite. Therefore, abandon all hope and just conform to the status quo.
That it cannot win, as we'll see, but its resentful reaction could be very effective.
Part 2. The Monster.
Politics at its core is the art of building coalitions of separate interest groups and incentivizing them to follow you and listen to your agenda.
No, it's fucking not. What is this?
However, the modern...
Hang on, what was that book he was looking at? What is that?
But its resentful reaction could be very effective. Politics at its core is the art of building coalitions of separate interest groups and incentivizing them to follow you and listen to your agenda.
Create and conquer through diplomacy. Is that a game? Hang on. Create and conquer through diplomacy, economy. What is this? What am I looking?
However, the modern left-wing order strategy has been trying to build the worst coalition possible, or the coalition of losers. We're going to look at the...
Wait, are they trying to build a coalition of losers, or do they run society? You kind of have to pick one. Like... Why do you think, President Sunday, why do you think academia is unable to leverage YouTube and social media despite the massive push to have education operate as a business? Combination of factors. First of all, they're working most academics to death, so they don't have time to do what I do. Stodginess and cowardice on the part of a lot of academics who do have time, bluntly. And I see a lot of people in my audience have this attitude too, where they feel like, oh, why are you responding to this stuff? This is beneath you. You should be like engaging in the life of the mind, or things like that. It's complicated. Among other things too, like there are academics who are very good content creators who just can't break in because the market's saturated, or because when they do try to break in, you have dipshits with a lot of clout who will attempt to look smarter than them, or who feel threatened by them, who will use the format or will use their audience to mock the people they're talking to and make them seem less informed than they are. Destiny and that music person, Trans Voices, stands out in my mind. Where like she would be giving like a really cogent, really like articulate and well-structured response to something he said, explaining why he's wrong. and he'll mute his mic and talk to his chat, or he'll mute his Discord and talk to his chat. It's like, Jesus, am I ever gonna get a chance to speak? Stuff like that. That's endemic. In addition, as well, like doing good academic work in no way correlates with being able to deliver it well to a general audience. In fact, often it's directly the opposite. Even people like Max Weber talked about this. Being a good academic does not mean being a good teacher, and being a good teacher does not mean being a good academic. And you kind of need to be both in order to do this thing well, which is why I don't. So.
The social incentives provided by both the left and the right wing's coalitions as keys to seeing the future. You need to view our current era, or that stemming back to World War II, as a conscious reaction to World War II.
Look at this. See the leftists just running all of our institutions, which is why the people with the shields are all on the left, right?
War II. The current ruling class is trying to be the exact opposite of the Nazis. Where the Nazis were nationalistic, masculine, militaristic, racist, and traditional, the modern left is transnational, feminine, pacifist, toxically anti-racist, and progressive.
By implication, we need to be more like the Nazis. That's the direct, logical conclusion of that statement.
With the decline of Christianity, which pushed intellectual humility, we didn't think further than, let's just do the opposite of the Nazis since they're evil.
You were just saying that the most reasonable use of history is to try and predict the future. That's not humility. That's adopting a God's eye standpoint on the basis of minimal information. What is this? Let's look at this slide. What Europe should have done since World War II. Lil Pump's music. Bronyism. Nazism. Communism. Handmaid's Tale. Sex slaves making McNukes for Jeff Bezos. Being pathetic and irrelevant. We needed to adopt a nice, good mean, a nice, good middle-of-the-road approach between bronyism, being pathetic and irrelevant, and Nazism. And you know, we need to balance all that out with a bit of sex slaves making McNukes for Jeff Bezos. He knows that Jeff Bezos is American, right? This is what Europe should have done since World War II. Anyways.
Also, Marxists purposely twisted this for their own benefit. The modern West hates men, its dominant ethnicities, tradition, force, and all that. However, the problem with building a coalition of everyone who was...
Everyone in this picture is white! What do you mean they hate the dominant ethnicity?
However, the problem with building a coalition of everyone who wasn't part of the previous coalition of power is that it just doesn't make sense. There are often long-standing historic reasons why the dominant ethnic group, men and all that, are the ones in charge. If you have a country like America and you want it to function, you can't flagellate white people for practicality's sake since they're 3/4 of the population. Well, if we're being really brutal, America has flourished while being incredibly cruel to black people, which are only 12% of the population. The reason I went through that long segment...
I don't know what he was saying by that. I mean, I know what he was saying by that. I understand the direct implication. Like, he's just making overt nods at this point to the thesis, if we want to dignify it with that term, that white people have some kind of genetic superiority which directly corresponds to the dominance of quote-unquote Western states. But that sentence made no sense, just grammatically.
Earlier on, trying to explain the left's worldview, is that you can only understand how they are this bad at coalition building and having a...
No, they're bad at coalition building because they actually believe in stuff. The right is good at coalition building because they're willing to sacrifice any and all standards or values just for the brute fact of having a lot of people on side. This is why you have a bunch of Catholics being buddy-buddy with actual, like, with atheistic fascists and whatnot, because they're whoring out their actual values for a sense of being on the right side of history. Not even joking. That's literally it. Every single thing the right accuses the left of, the right is almost uniquely guilty of, just in the grossest fashion possible.
A coherent strategy through understanding...
Bro, this is some damn near fascist apologia. No, this is just fascist apologia. This is just... That's all it is. It's not just fascist apologia. It's fascist propaganda by a very, very stupid man who doesn't need to do it. He just does it because it makes him feel important and smart and powerful.
And how their worldview thinks having a completely idealistic scheme would work. The left's coalition is that between the government, Marxists, women, and ethnic or sexual minorities.
So you want to be against ethnic minorities? What is this? What do you mean government supporters too? You were showing a picture of leftists, supposedly, fighting against police. What do you... What's the prefix in the word police? Rudyard?
Including immigrants, largely against white men and the traditions of the society. As said before, the problem with the left's coalition is that it's literally designed off groups that have failed to end up in the ruling coalition. Let's take ethnic minorities. Asians and Hispanics largely want to assimilate into white America, and the track record for former slaves...
The track record for ex-black slave nations are Haiti, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. Liberia literally was founded by American blacks. In each case, the former slaves rebuilt the social model they were used to, enslaving other black people. This may be shocking, but why? It's the only social model they knew, and whites weren't preaching the values of freedom and equality to them. Oh my god. If you look at majority black congressional plus political districts in America, they are extremely so bad they couldn't even afford a T. Extremely poor and corrupt. Remember, the black slaves were denied... Why is black capitalized? Were denied any self-governance, education, and independence for centuries. If you look at other slave-ruling classes like the Mamluks, it's the same. Oh my god. You know white people enslaved white people too, right? Caucasians enslaved Caucasians. Greeks enslaved Greeks all the time. Romans enslaved Romans. Don't get me started on the Irish.
Slave black populations gaining power is Liberia and Haiti, both of which are failed states that practice slavery, largely since they gained none of the skills needed for leadership due to centuries of oppression. For women, they're absolutely wonderful as individuals and a big reason to keep living as a man.
Women are absolutely lovely as individuals.
And they also form the bedrock of society. However, women have absolutely no track record for forming large groups. All of society's major institutions, whether militaries, governments, religions, corporations, have been founded across world history and almost entirely staffed by men.
Yeah, why do you think that was, Rudyard? I think they just weren't competing in the marketplace. They just couldn't. They weren't allowed to. You fucking idiot. There's like lines in the Bible that say women can't hold preaching positions. They have to be silent in the assembly or in the church. They couldn't be citizens in government. They were banned from it. But incidentally, one of the great, well, at least who is recorded as one of the great political geniuses and movers and shakers of the ancient world, was the mistress of Pericles. Couldn't hold office, couldn't like be named as responsible for anything, but was still nonetheless. This is like, I understand his resentment, because I wouldn't want to date what if cultist either, but like you're a little bit, it's a little bit too obvious for comfort right now.
Even nunneries and brothels, entirely female organizations, are run by men. If this was a cultural thing, not a biological, it would fluctuate around world history. But it does.
But it does. When women are allowed to access roles of importance and administrative authority, they do. And they do a really good job of it, which is why you are presently bitching about it in 2023.
Doesn't. Due to never having to evolve to hunt as a group, women do not have the same instinct towards cooperation that men do.
Or, allow me a classicist's interpretation. What if, birthing people, to use a leftist phrase, had on average a tendency to require being sedentary for a longer period of time than non-birthing people. And therefore, non-birthing people hunted. And the people who didn't hunt tended like gardens and engaged in agriculture and whatnot. And suppose, possibly, that the hunting people who had weaponry and organizations around that used that in order to appropriate for themselves the produce and the benefits, the goods produced by the people who were at home doing all of that other stuff. And then maybe over time, that sort of ossified into a household structure so that even when societies became settled, nonetheless, the people whose lot was to do those tasks, they weren't allowed into positions of governing authority or things like that. And so you have an interesting crystallization of sexes as classes in society, where one class is, despite the fact that they're responsible for like essential tasks, are nonetheless relegated to the status of second-class citizens or non-citizens, whereas the other one, despite doing far less essential tasks, often ones, especially once that other stuff is all sort of systematized and stable, that are extremely dangerous to the stability of the society, they are able to just rule over the other ones with impunity, just because they all have they function as an organized armed cabal, keeping them in line. That's the history of Greece, my friends.
Most really pretty girls have been horribly bullied in high school, and most of their friends are guys. Since women tear down successful or beautiful women, since their sexual competition is largely zero-sum.
Women compete against a limited pool of men for the highest quality, promotes low trust given you are competing inside the group. Men try to be successful by pulling in resources, thus making yourself an attractive mate. This is often done in cooperation with other men, thus creating in-group male unity.
Well, men are sexually rewarded by being what amounts to successful hunters.
President Sunday, in some Aboriginal tribes where women had fishing traditions, where they were involved, women had higher social status. Yeah, that seems to be, I'm not an expert on this, but that seems to have been like a trend that's been noted. Where there wasn't sex stratification in the acquisition of food early on, women had higher or even sometimes leadership roles. This is actually noted by most sociologists, even ones that were writing before 50 years ago. People like Fustel de Collage and whatnot note the contingency of specific practices that leads to patriarchal domination. This is not something that is dictated by nature.
And bringing stuff for the whole community. Studies show women are just as...
Exactly, yeah. Guys, famous for not tearing each other down. Oh my god. Rudyard, come on. Come on.
As men, and they compete through relationships using something my friend Kurt Doolittle refers to as GSR.
Kurt Doolittle? Your friend Kurt Doolittle? You mean the weirdo who pissed himself in public? That Kurt Doolittle? Not even joking. Hang on. This is like that propertarian guy. He's nuts, by the way. Like he's nuts. He's crazy, this one. Not to shame him for that in particular, it's just funny given who he is.
or gossiping, shaming, and rallying. When you look at cancel culture, how social justice pushes shaming to reach its goals, it's feminine aggression. Likewise, since women have been protected by men from the harshest parts of nature, like war, animals, forest fires, or the jungle, social justice can afford to be idealistic. The reason the left is so scared of physical force, saying wars, the police, or even spanking children is wrong, is that GSR simply cannot compete with men's physical force. As a general rule, any man who doesn't hate himself loves women as a species. Women have largely escaped the horrors of their own female cooperation by seducing men and forming families, in which they can use their sex as leverage against a single man, rather than trying to fight a social institution in which they as individuals have no leverage. If you were to see a GSR-based movement, it would have two separate things. The first is that it would despise...
Here, let's look into this for a second. This is actually kind of interesting. So Kurt Doolittle is a propertarian. What is propertarianism? Propertarianism is a political philosophy that reduces all questions of ethics to the right to own property. That's literally it. It starts in 1963. Let's see, is Kurt Doolittle even mentioned here? I'd be surprised if he wasn't. It's like it's inspired by Rothbard, I believe. But like Kurt Doolittle himself is bizarre. He had like a bunch of friends in the radical right for a little while. Is he on Wikipedia? Nope. No, he's not. Wow, it's like he's been erased from the internet. There used to be tons of stuff on him. Even Medicare was like on him for a little while. That's how I know about the pisses pants thing, because that's of course like what Medicare would jump on. Anyways, moving on. This is a wonderful book on political ideologies. It talks about, one, ideologies need their followers to be unhappy, so they need to depend on the ideology. Two, ideologies are a way of being free from freedom, letting the person involved sell off their feelings of inadequacy, fear, and responsibility for having an answer for everything. Social justice is absolutely no incentive to make the people who follow it happy, since then they aren't useful pawns. Of whom? If women are happy, they won't be dependent on third wave feminism, and the leaders will lose their jobs. I thought they ran society. What do you mean the leaders will lose their jobs? Did Biden get into office on a platform of third wave feminism?
Families and the sexes getting along. Because that's normally what happens in society, where the sexes pair off and start families, and modern social justice thinks being a mother is the worst thing a woman can do, because it would in effect pull a woman away from fighting against men for the goals of the movement and make her just a member of society. And the second thing is that you would see a vicious undercurrent against successful women, and we see that with the body positivity movement, where it's fundamentally a matter of personal responsibility to keep a healthy weight, but this movement talks about pretty privilege and says you cannot be judged for being overweight and unattractive.
Rudyard. Rudyard. This ain't a stone you want to throw, my dude. I'll just say that.
The third big group is the state. A group requires leadership, and in a healthy society, the leadership serves the people, but in many cases over history, that state has enslaved and even cannibalized its own populations. One of the books that was able to predict the current political divide was Leviathan and Its Enemies. It talks about the current ruling class, who unironically are taught through a leftist or
What the hell is this? Why American politics boiled down to college-educated versus non-college-educated. Economy. The left wants college-educated government workers to manage the economy. Meanwhile, the right wants to give as much freedom to non-college-based businessmen. So you want people without education to run the economy. Are you brain dead? He is. What default is. Social morality. The left wants college professors in various departments to determine social moral codes. No, they don't. That's the opposite of what most leftists want. That would college professors have a heavy class slant in terms of who actually manages to occupy professorial positions. Why is this all like white down here? Did I click on the wrong thing? Let's see. Unions map mode. There we go. That's what I want. Now you can see the changes going on over time. Defund the police. The left supports replacing non-college educated policemen with college educated social workers. A lot of police positions actually require post-secondary education. In fact, most of them do now, so that's incorrect. It's actually a little bit tricky. Like in my province, for example, you can't become a policeman without having a college education. This is why people take things like criminology in university. Foreign policy. The left prefers using college-educated diplomats. Look, I get it. You couldn't hack it in university and you dropped out, Rudyard. That's because you're an arrogant, mentally 15-year-old moron. That's not because the university did you in particular wrong. For international affairs and wars, while the right prefers using the non-college educated military. Even in the military, they will actually fund, like here for example, they will fund your way through college. You will be required to take courses. Some people join the military to get a free ride through university. That's the trade-off. Legislation. The left approves of college-educated bureaucrats making legislation over society while the right abhors this. Yeah, because the right just wants to be able to take entire populations and just deprive them of things without any conception of the consequences of that.
Marxist philosophic prism, use the downtrodden and oppressed as an excuse to push the bureaucracy and the college-educated into every facet of life. As I've said before in my previous videos, all of the left's...
But like non-college educated people could not have produced even the citations that you're using. Like, you need training to do this kind of stuff well. This is like the product of millennia of collaborative work. Why would you want everyone to start from scratch? That's stupid.
Policies push things that give the college-educated influence and power in society.
It must be nice to be able to just shamelessly say whatever you want with absolute confidence. Yeah, but he has the self-awareness of a barn animal. It's actually horrific. Like, there's nothing to envy here. This guy is in hell. He just lacks the organ to tell that he is.
Well, the right tries to benefit those who do not base their power
Like, does anybody envy this guy? Like, he's wealthier than most of you will ever be in your lives. I don't envy him one bit. This is like... This is catastrophic failure at a massive scale for an individual human being.
College degrees. The state and educated push all these oppressed groups at the expense of the dominant culture, since the dominant culture in Western countries has lots of social protections, called freedoms and checks and balances, that could curtail...
No, checks and balances... Checks and balances are between government institutions. That's a dispersal of executive authority across multiple agencies, on paper at least. That's not anything to do with the dominant demographic. That would obtain if the entire demographic makeup of a country had been completely swapped out for that of another one. Oh my god.
Their desire to save the world. This may sound unbelievably cynical, but it is literally what the Frankfurt School, which modern leftism is based off.
Okay. Why would they have to do this if they already ran society? Like, here's a question. When is this quote from? Let's see. There's a quote here, right? What's it from? Let's find the source. The quote is never given with a text citation. So 2 years ago, somebody else was looking for this on Reddit. So that's interesting. A Google search, shows that this quote is never given with a text citation, and it looks that it started making rounds in blogs and forums about 2 years ago. Without a source, the only other option would be to search through everything Horkheimer ever wrote, and I'd wager that would be a fool's errand. Not only is the source suspect, it doesn't match with Horkheimer's concerns, which are presented here. What it does match, however, is the slogan from the German communist student activist Rudi Dutschke in 1967, Long March Through the Institutions of Power. In fact, I'd say this is just a rewording and false attribution of this quote. Dutschke died in 1979 from an epileptic seizure, which I think is actually also when Horkheimer died, after having been shot in the head by a young anti-communist Josef Bachmann. Dutschke was neither a member of the Frankfurt School nor a critical theorist, but a part of the student movement in Germany in the 1960s. Does anybody else say anything about this? The only sources I can find for this quote are from unsourced quote websites and from right-wing conspiracy theorists, none of whom bothered to mention in which work or on what occasion Horkheimer is supposed to have said this, so we can reasonably assume it's a false attribution. So it looks like this is fake. But if it wasn't fake, it would directly belie the thesis of this video, that the left already runs everything. Why would you need to infiltrate the institutions if you're already in control of them? That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Says their plan is. I really love the metaphor of the Leviathan, since it's a reference to Hobbes's famous 17th century book Leviathan, which, in my opinion, correctly posits the argument the state prevents mass violence and oppression. However,
what libertarians think no state is like: infinite wealth, freedom, openness. Openness has two ends. What actually having no state is it? I want to make sure I didn't say that wrong. Openness. Yeah, it's got two ends, right? That'd be weird if it didn't. Openness, two ends. What actually having no state is like: bosses enslaving their employees. They would be slaves. No, the bosses wouldn't be enslaving their employees. You just have slaves. And that's not necessarily the case with a state. You can have slaves in a state. Most states have been slave states at some point in their history. Mass rape. You can have mass rape with states. It was not illegal, for example, to rape your wife until very recently. Horrifically recently, in fact. People are scared to travel. People are scared to travel presently. Example, Somalia. Somalia. Do you know why Somalia is the way it is? It's not because of the absence of a state. 1300s Germany, Republic of the Congo, Central Africa. This has been brought to you by Hobbes Gang. No, it fucking hasn't. No, it hasn't. Hang on, let's rewind. What did he actually say here?
I really love the metaphor of the Leviathan, since it's a reference to Hobbes's famous 17th century book Leviathan, which, in my opinion, correctly posits the argument the state prevents mass violence and oppression. However...
No, the state doesn't prevent mass violence and oppression. The state... The state is an oppressive force. What the state does is it supplies the security needed to have long-term projects in order to have, like, society or any kind of, like, institution over a duration of time. But it is definitionally an oppressive thing. The argument of Leviathan is that oppression is, in fact, downstream from the consent of the governed, because that is a condition of other goods that they want. You have absolute freedom in a state of nature. Ergo, you are oppressed when you're not in a state of nature. Hobbes argues that this is a good thing.
A big difference in the world that Hobbes wrote that in 400 years ago and today is that the state was so weak to barely function back then, so its growth was largely at the expense of bandits, pirates, oppressive local nobilities, and all that.
Then what was fighting with Cromwell then? Was it weak, or was it able to fight a civil war in its favor? What if all this is what would happen if a racist fortune cookie gained sentience and had read a few pages of an encyclopedia? I'm not convinced he's gained sentience.
However, starting in the 20th century, the state became so powerful as to strangle societies. However, the left uses the same justification as the Leviathan, bringing government into every aspect of life in order to protect people, and makes things fair. The Leviathan is powerful as to strangle societies. However, the left uses the same justification.
The left. What am I looking at here? That's an interesting choice of photograph. What am I looking at here? Does anybody know what this photo is of? What is this? I see Stars of David on the back wall. This does not portend positive things about what he's implying. Someone help me out here. What am I looking at? Are these communists who took over a synagogue? What is this? Okay. Let's try and find this thing. Someone do a... Oh, I closed it. Someone do an image search for this in Google for me and see what you find. Because that's a thing. Israeli Declaration of Independence. Looks that way. This is the Israeli Declaration of Independence. This is the Provisional Government of Israel. I see. What does he mean by this, folks? Just for absolute clarity, this is the sentence in which this image appears.
Wrote that in 400 years ago and today, is that the state was so weak to barely function back then, so its growth was largely at the expense of bandits, pirates, oppressive local nobilities, and all that. However, starting in the 20th century, the state became so powerful as to strangle societies. However, the left uses the same justification as the Leviathan, bringing government into every aspect of life in order to protect people, and makes things fair.
So, the left uses the same tactics as the Leviathan, and his point of reference for this is the state of Israel, I would assume, using the tools that are appropriate to it as a state, disregarding ethics and whatnot of like the manner in which that state came about. Oh my god, that's a lot. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna die. Is there any left? Do you want to like split this? Here, to split some of this. I'm literally going to like die if I drink all of that, but thank you. Don't drink half of it in one go. Oh my god. So, when he says the left here, he means Jews. When he says the left runs society, he means Jews. That's the direct upshot of this. Wow. I'm honest. I'm actually surprised by him. I didn't realize he'd be so brazen. By the way, Bullet, bourbon, cheap, but it's really good. Judeo-Bolshevism, indeed.
The Leviathan, bringing government into every aspect of life in order to protect people and makes things fair. The Leviathan is an even better metaphor since it's a reference to the sea monster from the Bible. In the cultural context of the Bible was written in, the Leviathan, and even more directly, the Mesopotamian Tiamat it's very clearly based off, is the symbol of the force of feminine chaos in the universe.
Chaos!
And I mean, fuck it, the left even uses demonic imagery to describe itself at this point. That doesn't get more chaos than that. And in the same way as Tiamat and Leviathan were killed by the masculine god of the coherent...
That's the Dungeons and Dragons Tiamat, by the way.
...strategy and written word, you will see a rebellion by young men kill the Leviathan. There's an African saying that goes, if you don't give the young men a place in the village, they will burn it down to feel its warmth. The Leviathan's coalition has made a couple completely fatal errors, which doom them over the next few decades. One of the two largest is that it simply provides no incentive for young men, who form the gas that powers a society, to work inside the system and not rebel against it. The paradox inside young men is that they are simultaneously by far the most powerful force in society, but they're also incredibly insecure. Young men are the demographic that wages war, explores, builds, does the vast majority of scientific or philosophic breakthroughs, is the...
Einstein said that if a young scientist hasn't already, because, you know, what if autist? No, not going to go there. Einstein said that if a young scientist hasn't already gotten the outline of the brilliant intellectual breakthrough he will make by age 25, it will never happen. Testosterone and creativity are heavily correlated. I mean, yeah, if you don't educate women or allow them into government or into, you know, careers, they will not have opportunity to manifest creativity in a notable way. As often, that's how that works. This is why inventions, philosophical, and all other breakthroughs are heavily concentrated in young men. It's also why academia probably keeps people studying until age 30 when testosterone rates go down, since they won't try to rock the boat with new ideas. Now, that would be an argument for them starting post age 30. And this is the guy in class who thought he knew everything, who was arguing with the professor and getting everything wrong in a rude way and then just jumped ship because he was clearly right in, like, second year. That's who what if autist is.
The major driving force behind the economy in both hours worked.
Exactly, has been. Creativity is stored in the balls.
And in trying and discovering new things. Young men are the force that just pushes society forward.
This is glass number 2, so I was asking for water. So this is going to be interesting, folks.
Words. And once societies start to age and lose young men, like Japan or Europe, they just stop doing anything new and decay. Young men are quite insecure because they're society's foot soldiers, and they're willing to do that in exchange for being a hero or getting a beautiful wife. However, this makes them extremely sensitive to political changes because it could kill them, and that...
Political changes famously never killed women.
That's why the audience for this YouTube channel is so heavily young men. You have twice as many female ancestors as...
What the hell was that? What is this editing? My dude, you make too much money per video to do this. Hire an editor.
In exchange for being a hero or getting a beautiful wife. However, this makes them extremely sensitive to political changes because it could kill them, and that's why the audience for this YouTube channel is so heavily young men. You have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors for a reason.
It's like he's arguing with himself and he's talking over himself. That's so weird.
A healthy society feeds young men stories of heroism in order for role models, gives them apprenticeships with older men who teach them useful skills, become stakeholders, and marries them off young. However, modern societies give young men absolutely no incentive to work with them. The economy is terrible with social mobility.
Yeah, look at this. What's the young man supposed to do? It's like this is just a picture of a city. What is that? It's not Dubai. Is that even real? What is this thing? The scale looks so weird. Is that a photograph? Thank you. Looks almost like a City Skylines mod.
Ability collapsing with no direction forward for most young people. The media hates masculinity, refusing to put out any content with male role models. The society pushes subservience and docility ever since childhood. The educational...
What do you mean with not putting out any movies with male role models? Most protagonists are male. And most protagonists that are female are typically occupying traditionally male roles. Like there's the only feminine thing about Ripley in Alien 1 is that she's referred to as she.
System which provides socialization is incredibly feminized.
John Wick 4, yeah, John Wick 4 just hit. The leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy is still a guy. It's still Thor.
I remember when I was 10, I drew pictures of swords.
God of War. I was watching a bit of God of War earlier. Odin is... I was listening to Odin's theme. Odin is so well done. Oh my god. I can't get enough of that. That's like the best movie of the last 5 years was a video game, was God of War Ragnarok, in my humble opinion. The Mario movie stars a man. Yeah, but they let Peach do stuff that isn't just servile, so therefore Mario got cucked and everything. Despite the fact that Mario beat the bad guy and the bad guy was male, and everybody and had to also save the princess anyways. And that was the premise of the source material. But he had to save Luigi, so therefore... Has anyone seen the Mario movie? It's a combination of surprisingly good and surprisingly bad. I got the impression it was insecure about establishing sort of itself as a film, and so it tried to do the kind of like... It tried to explain the origins of the Mario Brothers, which was a mistake, but the casting was fantastic, and it was fun besides.
In my free time, and I talked about Battle and Knights, and my parents were called in because they were worried I might become a school shooter, and that's just normal stuff guys do.
That's not why. That's not why Rudyard. They weren't. Oh god. Rudyard's parents were Rudyard's parents were afraid of Rudyard becoming a school shooter because he drew pictures of knights. That's why. What a... Ugh. Ugh.
You look at sex, this picture's even more horrifying. Male virginity, for a series of reasons I tackle in this video, has quadrupled in the last 10 years. For the first time, a majority of people at age 30 are single and childless. I consider myself a decently connected and social guy, and of the 50 most handsome, charismatic, and successful guys I know, and this includes CEOs, influencers, and all that, about 3 are in relationships. Large groups of sexually frustrated young men...
Whatever helps you sleep at night, my dude.
Are an incredibly good predictor of political violence. For some reference against the historic standard, in most cultures in the world, the young are married off at a young age by...
Here's a good rule of thumb, okay? I haven't heard what he's going to say about this yet, but I know it's going to be bad. Because it's Wittefultist, and everything he says is bad. You can't see down here because the stupid thing I can't get rid of, but it says here, J.D. Unwin, MC, PhD, okay? Actual academics never, ever, ever, ever put their credentials in the title of their books, even if they are the most eminent people in that field. Why? Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's just trashy. Your work should be sold on its own merits. But secondly, because the expectation with an academic audience is that you have credentials in the field to which you're speaking, or at the very least you have some level of education going in. If you are saying PhD, that's impressive to exactly one category of people, and that's to people who don't understand what a PhD actually entails. Because you can be very, very wrong with a PhD. And there's literally no reason to put PhD there unless you're otherwise completely unknown and essentially out of grace. Because what will happen if you're not is people will review your book, people will respond to your book, and it will become known, at the very least in academic circles. J.D. Unwin was a World War I soldier. Let's see here. J.D. Unwin. Yeah, but he doesn't read stuff written after 1950 because all of that stuff's like, cucked leftist shit. J.D. Unwin, PhD. In Sex and Culture from 1934, Unwin studied 80 primitive tribes and 6 known civilizations through 5,000 years of study. He claimed there was a positive correlation between the cultural achievement of a people and the sexual restraint they observe. Aldous Huxley described Sex and Culture as a work of the highest importance in his literature. Interesting. Yeah, I can see why this didn't age well. Unwin also stated, in the past, too, the greatest energy has been displayed only by those societies which have reduced their sexual opportunity to a minimum by the adoption of absolute monogamy. In every case, the women and children were reduced to the level of legal non-entities, sometimes also to the level of shadows, always to the level of mere appendages of the male estate. Eventually, they were freed from their disadvantages, but at the same time, the sexual opportunity of the society was extended. Sexual desires could then be satisfied in a direct or perverted manner. So the energy of the society decreased and then disappeared, unquote. This is basically NoFap November, the political philosophy.
By their parents, and the wives are basically slaves to their husbands. This isn't an especially good sexual orientation, but the fact that it's the historical and social norm around most of the world even today shows...
So look, what if Aldous is just built differently than us? He's smarter precisely because he can get no sex.
How keeping the number of sexually frustrated young men down... And
Themic for $2. The worrying part is they might still be right. What are you referring to? Yeah, clarify if you could.
incentivizing them to work in society by having kids is so important. The sad truth is that women have been horribly oppressed by men over history, since societies are incentivized to sacrifice women to get men to work harder. This breaks down even more with the high divorce rate. Men work hard with the knowledge that they can get married and thus pass on their genes. However, with no-fault divorce, 40% of marriages fail, which is initiated in 70% of cases by women, and among the college-educated, 90% among women.
Yeah, right. We need to stop the women from deciding to not be the thralls of their husbands.
It's normal for a woman to walk away with the kids and a majority of a man's money. Marriage is the foundation of every society.
Oh, I see. You're talking about his parents. Post additional security at schools in this guy's hometown. I see. You're a little bit behind. Gotcha. He's talking about the fact that Rudyard's parents were afraid of him being a school shooter.
Ever. And in the modern context, there's absolutely no incentive for a man to get married and have children, since he can lose everything for having done nothing wrong. Modern society shames young men for having done nothing wrong, rather imagined crimes committed by their ancestors. Young men are wired to look for female approval genetically to breed, and so having female disapproval scream at them will cause immense resentment. The feeling among young men that's not unwarranted is that they're in a losing game where no matter what they do, they fail. They have no direction forward or male role models, meaning in the really hard times we live in, which is...
What do you mean they have no male role models? We have centuries of male role models. Centuries. Most role models are male. That's why the female role models in a lot of modern films are novel.
is why figures like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson are so successful. However, the Leviathan's coalition is held together.
No, they're successful because their people are being worked to death and being completely isolated from their communities by the conditions of modern capitalism. And so there's something inherently pacifying and sort of like head clearing about someone telling you just to do like, is there cheese in there? Oh, that's brilliant. About someone just telling you to do like basic self-care stuff. Like Jordan Peterson isn't famous because he's like a good role model. The guy is a train wreck. Jordan Peterson is famous because in a very seductive and calming way, he said, no, what you need to focus on is just like turn off your sensors to everything on the outside and just like work on yourself. Just breathe, close it in. Focus on the domestic and the easily manipulable, because that's really de-stressing. That seems like it seems like clarity, but it's actually just deliberately blinding yourself to more complex things and focusing only on things that you already at present can directly affect, which, by the way, there's merit to, but that's why that's the appeal of Jordan Peterson.
They're at the expense of young men. Thus, it cannot let up and give young men a bone. Also, like the creature it's named after, without belief in any kind of structure or strategy, the Leviathan pushes onwards inchoately. The Leviathan knows subconsciously that a young male rebellion is in the works, which is why it cracked down on Tate so harshly, since he had become a rallying cry that could be used against them.
Is Wadifaltis a Tate fan? Oh my god, he is. Wadifaltis is a Tate simp. That explains so much.
Peterson's demonized, except most of his philosophy is just telling young people to be responsible, and even his anti-trans takes would have been normal 10 years ago. I'm often called a Nazi or far-right, even though I'm one of the very few people in the public sphere.
Buddy, you talk about the left using the powers of the state, and your immediate point of reference is the bare fact of Jews running, of like the declaration of Israeli independence. You show a photo of a bunch of Jewish politicians in front of Stars of David. People are equivocating you with a Nazi because the only difference between you and a Nazi is that you're not German.
Who actually talks about how other cultures and anthropology works. The thing with the Leviathan's coalition is that it's terrified of using physical force, having to rely upon GSR or gossiping, shaming, and rallying. That means that it actually has no real power, for as Mao Zedong said, power comes from the muzzle of a gun. When a society doesn't have the ability to actually use military force, it gets conquered. When young men get to the point where they are tired of the system, they have the veto power where the Leviathan can't really do anything. They can shame at the top of their lungs, but we're getting to the point where young men have nothing to lose socially and lots to gain by killing the Leviathan. You can sense the rightward tilt in just the social air among young men. It's going to take years to play out, but for so many young men that were just normal people, voted Democrat or Labor, been feminists... and
Look, Hobbes 101 for people, because everybody gets this wrong. The Leviathan is not the state. The Leviathan is the person of the state. It is the perception at distance due to a process of fading sense, which is why Hobbes begins with a description of human psychology and sensation and yada yada yada, that stuff, before he gets into like the discussion of like the state of nature and the origins of the Commonwealth and so forth. The Leviathan is the perception of a singular power representing the state, representing the Commonwealth in his language. You don't kill the Leviathan. If you think you can kill the Leviathan is already dead. The entire reason why it's called the Leviathan is because the perception of the person of the state is of something indomitable. It can't be beaten. That's the point. If you think it can be beaten, it doesn't fulfill its function anymore. That's its purpose, to seem insurmountable so that people are held to their contracts. That's what it's for.
And all of that, They're listening
It's
to
literally an illusion. It's not the state itself.
right-wingers since the left provides them absolutely
This
no
is so
incentive,
spicy.
and they're drifting further and further
Good,
to the
though.
right. It's normally a little bit beneath the radar, where these young guys won't say it openly, but once they're allowed to think or speak freely, you'll hear it come out. Left-wingers fail to realize that the only reason the far right would seize power is because of them. There will be a tipping point in which the consensus changes.
Wait, what?
The thing with GSR is it's almost a form of magic.
Wait, what? What did you just say?
Openly, but once they're allowed to think or speak freely, you'll hear it come out. Left-wingers fail to realize that the only reason the far right would seize power is because of them. There will be a tipping point in which the consensus...
The only reason the far right would seize power is because of the left? Why? I think you mean the far right wouldn't exist as a distinct category if the left didn't exist, because then it would simply dominate. Which is, like, obvious. What if all this in high school? Look, officer, I only cited Mein Kampf 27 times for my presentation. I'm no threat, I just like the Crusades. Look, as an amateur classicist and someone educated in political science, this is the story of my life. Having to explain, look, just because I'm interested in ancient Greece doesn't mean I'm a white nationalist. Dear God, the last 20 years have not been kind to people in my field.
This changes. The thing with GSR is it's almost a form of magic, and was its only power comes from people believing it has power. This is the movement that will not evict the homeless from city centers or prevent criminals from violating property rights, let alone violently maintaining its power. The Leviathan is a giant deck of cards. The social order it's pushed since World War
Leviathan is like a box of chocolates. Look, folks. I poisoned myself for you. I am continuing to poison myself for you. Super chat the channel if you appreciate what I do. I am shortening my life by years just to provide you with this high quality content for a discriminating audience like this. If you like what I do, I have a Patreon link in the description. That's the ideal way to support the channel. Or super chat me and show your appreciation to the chat. Much obliged. Let's press on.
War II has resulted in collapsing birth rates, which will kill the economies of every major country in the world, except America or India. Areas that are really going to get affected hard are China, Russia, Japan, or Europe. In America, we're still going to see a lot of aging. However, the breaking of societies that will come from this, where there are two 70-year-olds for each 25-year-old, will result in mass social changes towards family values and conservatism, so this traumatic event never happens again. A collapsing birth rate is the death of the feminist movement. It simply cannot survive this existential threat. If collapsing birth
Yeah, fuck you too, Brooks. Thanks for the $5.
rates are destroying society, people aren't going to say, it's your choice whether or not you have children, you don't need a partner. They'll say, get a fucking partner and start pumping out kids. Women now support the Leviathan since they believe it will help them. However, once the current generation of women realizes they are slated for deaths as lonely spinsters, which disincentivizes men from marrying them through the current divorce laws, you'll suddenly hear them change their tune. So many girls who are very proud in their 22 suddenly wish they had traded in their looks for a match earlier when...
This is the what if Altis girlfriend arc. That's what this is. Thank you, Insomnoir. What if Altis needs to what if alt F4? Oh my god, I can't believe I got that. Oh man. Rudyard. Just hit the gym. You know, work on your... Go clothes shopping. Work on your speech. You're not this annoying. Go meet people. Don't be a dick. You'll find somebody. I assure you.
When they're 34 or 40-year-olds divorcing think they'll have the same options as when they got married in their 20s. Remember, the Leviathan is incentivized to keep women lonely and angry since that's when they're the best foot soldiers. If the current trends continue, nearly half of women in their 20s will end up being unmarried, and a large part of that childless. Also, in America at least, one of the Leviathan's biggest weaknesses are that most minorities, such as Hispanics and Asians, would rather assimilate into the broader white society, which is why they immigrated to America in the first place, than push being victims.
You know, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect this to be a 51-minute long explanation of why people won't date what if all this just because they're dirty, rotten status. Thank you, Them, for the $2. All this because I took his mother on a date. Yeah, exactly.
Which black people, who are only 12%
I mean, strange coincidence, but yeah.
Population, can do convincingly, since they do have a long history of repression. Also, Hispanic and Asian young men...
Asians do logically, have the right to play the victim card in America since they were horribly mistreated by... Wait a minute. Wait a second. Rare for the history of America. Asians were horribly mistreated by forbidding them to own land, stopping immigration in 1890, prevented from working in most professions, and the Japanese were rounded up into camps in World War II. Just the Asians? Just Asians would have faultist, Rudyard? Just Asians, huh? Nobody else? Just no other, like, conspicuous example of a minority group being mistreated in American history? Can't think of anybody? No? Okay. Alright. Okay.
Men have many of the same grievances against the Leviathan as young men. Likewise, older men will likely side with young men unless they are direct stakeholders in the previous order, seeing the current order as unsustainable since it so clearly hates masculinity. The leadership in corporations largely does not care about wokeness, it's just the bureaucratic staff they have to hire to run their corporations.
Wait, you said they run all the institutions. Earlier in the same video, you were saying the left runs all the institutions. Now you're saying they don't care.
And it's the cultural norm being pushed now that you get pushback for going against. Wokeness hurts corporate performances, as we've plainly seen with Disney as a great example. And so the market has to readjust, or these broken organizations will be replaced by newer, more vigorous ones. This shift in consensus has to occur over the next few decades for the reasons I've explained before. As I've explained in this video, I will be surprised if
Disney has lazy writing. That's why they're failing, because of they're oversaturating. People are getting bored with it. The Mario movie put Princess Peach into like a hero role, and it outperformed Sonic 2.
if it's directly violent or an actual war, since the Leviathan is totally unwilling to use physical force.
What?
As I've explained in this video, I will be surprised if it's directly violent or an actual war, since the Leviathan is totally unwilling to use physical force.
If the Leviathan is unwilling to use physical force, then it's not... What is he saying here? I know Disney's not doing badly. He's probably talking about like some of the recent Star Wars films not performing particularly well, because I think Solo failed in theaters. Actually, hang on. No. That you're right. That is wrong. Let's see. Thor: Love and Thunder. How did it perform? Which, by the way, like made woman Thor like a victim in the story. Thor: Love and Thunder was what's the 8th highest grossing film of 2022. It was very successful. No Solo bombed at the box office, but Rise of Skywalker still made $1 billion, yeah.
As I have said before, I'm more worried at the reaction than the Leviathan itself. The Leviathan is fundamentally delusional and weak. Its only damage can come from destroying pre-existing social units rather than actively building itself. However, angry white...
What is he talking about? Oh, I see. Of course, he's an idiot. So by Leviathan, he means the Jews who run society are weak because they can only destroy older societies. Got it. All right.
Men have an extremely good track record at being very good at being cruel for long periods of time, since it's realistic, organized, and effective. One of the things that worries me is a combination of the looming financial crisis that will crush many young people's already not great standards of living, thus further radicalizing them with nothing to lose. The Leviathan pays absolutely no attention to class issues, ironically, and in fact has buy-in from major corporations, meaning these economic problems will end up being co-opted by the far right. It's kind of funny in that the right has traditionally been seen as the party of the wealthy and business interests, but similarly to Nazi Germany, where the Nazis positioned themselves as the party of the working German man who could supply family, stability, work, and having a normal life, the right can co-opt this because the left has become the party of the ruling class. And so a narrative we've seen a lot in the new right, because it might be true, is the World Economic Forum globalist elites are trying to crush the local working classes.
I don't think the left and the World Economic Forum actively wants to hurt the working class. I think the establishment on both the right and the left were incentivized to crush wages by immigration, globalization, etc. The right under Trump started going for the dissatisfied working classes to get the vote. Then the left, who had most of the major corporations on their side, had to take the opposite position since it cannot agree with the right on anything. Likewise, their main supporters are college-educated elite aspirants who are in direct conflict with the uneducated working classes. They're aspirants, though. Thus continuing the right-left divide really being about college education. He's really, insecure about the fact he didn't finish his bachelor's degree, huh? That's what this is all about. He can't get a girlfriend and he couldn't finish his BA. That's it.
Are trying to crush the local working classes. As I've talked about before in previous videos, I think that America and Europe will have a major political crisis over the next 2 decades. However, I'm not going to go into as much detail about this in this video just because I've done so many hours before about it. But long story short, you can look at these various patterns to predict political and social crises, and the Western world has all of them. In the same way the baby boomer generation was able to dominate politics and society for over 60 years, my age group, or Gen Z, is the last big generation in America, and so you would expect us to also have a disproportionate influence over the next couple decades. And if you look across Western history, you tend to see patterns of around 60 to 80 years of pushing a certain cultural trend, often in backlash to a previous one. There are 2 separate kinds of conservative revolution. The first is a more limited
You're gonna leave me hanging there.
one in which the conservatives are able to
God,
seize power.
That cut, the editing is so bad. Oh, Velvet Magneta, thank you so much for the $20. For the Leviathan. And a down payment on the future Dugan vid. No pressure, really, none at all. I will actually do that fairly, I don't want to say soon, but I'm gonna start work on it soon. A lot of what I'm doing right now is sort of gearing towards that video, which is why it's gonna be the capstone for this, the next foreseeable, sequence of vids. But thank you so much, I appreciate that.
Around 60 to 80 years of pushing a certain culture.
See, be like Velvet Magneta. If you like what I do, this is what keeps the wheel turning. I live off these. Thank you.
trend, often in backlash to a previous one. There are two separate kinds of conservative revolution. The first is a more limited one, in which the conservatives are able to seize power for a few decades due to a major mistake the left has made. However, the left still...
A major mistake the left has made. That's a good video. Here are 10 mistakes the left can make in 2023.
...the greater amount of cultural vigor and wins in the end. You saw this happen in Latin America a lot over the 20th century, as well as Central Europe in the 20th century. In this first scenario, we see something that Carol
fuck that. We're going to talk about this now.
Quigley, who is possibly the greatest historian...
God, this editing is so bad. What is this? The Western pendulum. This doesn't describe a pendulum. I guess, like... The Renaissance, socially liberal, classical humanist, Leonardo, artistic... What? And the pendulum swung to the Reformation, which is socially Puritan, Stoic, bourgeois, Martin Luther. The Age of Sciences, rational, humanist, democratic, nonconformist. The Enlightenment, rational... What? The Age of Sciences was opposite the Enlightenment? We swung from the Age of Sciences to the Enlightenment? What? Here, you can't see this. It's too small. Look at this. Look at the bottom part of this. The Age of the Sciences, that was one side of the pendulum, and then we swung to the Enlightenment against the Age of Science? And then we swung from the Enlightenment to the Romantic. Revolutions, emotion, religion, and Rousseau? What? But Rousseau was like ahead of his time. He was borderline an evolutionist in a lot of ways. Industrial... Wait, But the industrial isn't the opposite of revolutionary. That's why it's called the Industrial Revolution! Why is Abraham Lincoln the standout here? This doesn't make any sense.
Historian of the last century talks about, in that the West has had alternating periods between 50 to 100 years over the last 500 years of pushing ideologies that are either order or chaos based, where the Renaissance was about humanism and art and all that's very intuitive. After it came the Reformation that was very socially conservative and built around trying to fix people up for God better. And another example being the Enlightenment, which was all about trying to rationally improve society, followed by the Romantic period that had both very extreme, emotional, powerful movements on both the right and the left. And here's a text wall to go through this process. But social justice is possibly the biggest attempt at Western social engineering so far, or the order side.
Social justice is originally a Catholic idea. It's also, why is that the opposite of irrational activisms? Like, even on your end.
So much order, in fact, that it's failed and become a beast of chaos. And in reaction, you would see a more human, religious, intuitive philosophy that would probably exist as a reaction against how digitized and mechanical our lives are with the computer revolution. The German philosopher Hegel, although I really dislike a lot of his work, has
you can't read his work. I can barely read his work. You can't read Hegel. You don't understand Hegel.
Interesting point of a synthesis and an antithesis, where a society pushes a certain idea, then it pushes the opposite one, and then it finds what are the good points shared between both of them.
No, that's not what Hegel is. Oh my god. No. He's Oh, that was psychically wounding. Oh my god. He thinks Hegel's talking about society having one crazy idea and another crazy idea and just smashing them together until you get a sort of good idea. That's not what that's referring to. It's talking about the imminent contradiction in things. Oh. Oh, God. I think he got his interpretation of Hegel from Caesar from Fallout New Vegas. I don't remember Caesar from Fallout New Vegas being that dumb. Oh, God. Dietrich, thanks for the $20. Do Ginvid. What's Ginvid? What do you mean? Do Ginvid. I don't know what you're talking about, Dietrich. Can you clarify? Oh. Oh my God, can you... I hate to ask this, can you make me coffee? I'm gonna have an aneurysm, thank you. Oh. Appreciate it. Oh my God. Sorry to make you move. Oh. Oh my God. Oh, it's pronounced Kaiser in... Oh, is it? Oh, thank you, Insomnoir. Appreciate that for your impending stroke here.
And you can see this in Western history, where often the reaction to the previous era is what the current era is about, with the Enlightenment being rationality, the Romantic era being emotionality, the Renaissance being the...
No! And why's your point of reference Rousseau? He's like a rigorous historian. He's a theorist exactly like Hobbes. He's engaging with the same material.
The Greco-Roman heritage of Western civilization, the Reformation being the Christian Germanic barbarian. Writing in the 60s, Carroll Quigley called the post-World War II era the era of social justice. And it's fundamentally the West's period.
Social justice is so obsessed with order that it ends up creating chaos. It splits the whole world into easy brackets, denies human nature, creates a caste system, and then, since it is doing social engineering on a massive scale without any reference to reality, it creates mass chaos in its wake. So much so that we can't even spare a period to end this sentence. Oh my... Oh my God.
Of the most social engineering ever. And it's so based around rigid ideological structures or the search for order that it in fact has the opposite effect and becomes a beast of chaos.
Chaos! Thank you, Oren, for the $5.50 for my coffee/Advil funds. We got the Advil, fortunately. Don't worry, we are equipped here.
Also, if you look to the rise of the Nazi movement, and as I talk about in my video Disgust promulgates right-wing authoritarianism. And our current society, and especially the left, is pushing massive amounts of behavior that just disgust normal people. Sam Smith's latest performance at the Grammys, and the fact that it was supported by the establishment, shows...
He really has it in for this guy with the devil horns and the top hat. This guy in particular. That just... He saw that and he was just filled with rage.
And so, as much as the left pushes, let's say, drag shows or things that the normal person finds disgusting, they can expect a horrible reaction similar to Nazi Germany's reaction to the...
What's your issue with drag shows? What do they do to you? That's not even a trans thing. That's just... What's wrong? Why?
Weimar period. So the...
Oh, thank you. You're a lifesaver. Here, can I give you this one as well? Thanks so much.
First situation, or the one I described before, is a conservative victory lasting around 80 years. The second one is that someone just straight up founds a new religion, strong sect of Christianity, or philosophy that acts as a religion.
Wait. Do Genvid G as in get? Do get invid? What does that mean? Dietrich, I don't understand. I do not understand. I'm so perplexed and confused.
Religion. Across history, every religion has been a conservative...
And what do you mean you have to choose between Drunk Sunday or Drunk Vaush? I am Vaush.
revolution, where Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Confucius all did not view themselves as founding religions, but as fixing the previous religious teachings of their earlier society and finding something.
No, they did. Okay, first, Buddhism and Taoism are not religions. That's like a Christian form that's been retroactively applied to them by really, really bad social science in present day. But Christianity and Islam saw themselves as the correct manifestations of the most ancient religion. They thought that they were a continuation of the proper form of worship that went back to Adam and Eve. They did see themselves as the founding religions. They just saw themselves as the correct form of the founding religions. That's the point.
Immutably ancient and true. And the thing is, conservative religious revolutions last for thousands of years. And an example of this...
Conservative revolutions that lasted centuries and millennia. Platonists beat the materialists. What do you mean there weren't materialists back then, Rudyard? They didn't exist. We didn't have substance dualism for like over 1,000 years after that. The Christians beating the pagans. That's not conservative. The pagans were... It literally refers to like the fact that they were entrenched in the countryside where they worked. It's the heathens, not pagans. What does pagan mean? Hang on. I knew this before. Pagan etymology. Yeah, country. Same thing. From the pagus, country or district. These were like the traditional like household and plot worships that were directly tied to the integrity of the social order. They were the conservatives. The Christians were the revolutionaries. They were destructive of society. It's even literally in the New Testament. I bring not peace but a sword. I will separate husband from wife, a child from his father or parents or whatever. Al-Ghazali crushes the Mu'tazila. None of these are conservative. That's why you're defaulting. Well, I guess that's not why technically you're defaulting, but that's why people default to the characterization of the revolutionary left as being religious. By reference to this. G.K. Chesterton, the namesake of this channel, he refers to the Christians frequently as an ancient analog to modern anarchists.
This is how the Hindu Brahmins were able to beat out the new Buddhists in 3rd century India. Another is the early Christians taking over the Roman Empire and establishing a more conservative philosophy that kept going for thousands of years. As I talk about in my video on the internet, I think this is actually decently plausible.
All of your videos are on the internet, you idiot.
Society lacks any real unifying values. So there's a giant pressure towards a new religious formation, and on top of that, the internet allows mass preaching to go around the world instantly, thus creating a new avenue for it. If you look at Spengler's theory of history, the West is currently in the era of Caesarism, and it's a pretty common pattern, actually, when societies try to adopt a different religion during Caesarism and the start of the Universal Empire, and then reject it later on and return to what they had before. You saw this in China, which tried to take Buddhism and then reverted back to Confucianism. In India...
What is Caesarism? It's not what he's talking about. Caesarism is... It's how to put this? You know in Weber how there are different sources of legitimacy or different forms of rule. Like there's charismatic rule. Charismatic rule would be frequently oriented around like a figure like Caesar or like Napoleon or someone like that. Spengler's rough idea is that there are conditions under which, like in a condition of societal decline and stagnation, essentially, in which like a certain hyper creative and violent. I'm gonna bullshit this by the way because my Spengler's not fantastic, but there's like a type of like charismatic figure can arise that then becomes like the center of gravity for a creative and maybe reconstructive, but maybe that's going too far. Kind of like guiding light for a civilization in a situation of stagnation, if that kind of makes sense. I'm probably butchering that.
India, which tried Buddhism as well.
Spenglerian notion of autocracy comes from social decay. Yeah, that's my understanding.
And then went back to Hinduism. In the Middle Eastern world, they tried Christianity for a few centuries, and then reverted back to Islam, which is much more similar to the previous tribal...
The Middle Eastern world is a geographic region that was identified primarily as a result of global politics. It's not a civilization.
Religions they had. And in the
West... It's definitely not a state or anything coherent like that.
West, we're trying Marxism for a few centuries. And then there's a pretty good shot from the precedent of us returning to Christianity. I mean, there has to be a new ideology just because the old ones cannot deal with the modern world well enough. Imagine...
Is Vaush actually going live right now and stealing my thunder? He is, that son of a bitch. Bastard.
Just a legit straight-up fascist country today, or a straight-up Stalinist country. That's played out, and you always see changes in how conservative or progressive ideas manifest, where no one could have predicted the Nazi movement in 1900, and they might have predicted there would be a conservative movement, and probably a racist one at that, but not exactly what it was. If whatever ideology...
So is Demon Mama? God, it's like the leftist cabal is conspiring against me. It's because of the top hat. They think I'm a reactionary.
...comes out of this as poorly designed, it won't be able to garner long-term support, but if it's well-designed, it'll take over and become the cultural context.
It's my fault. Well, it's my computer's fault. I was supposed to start an hour earlier. But then OBS decided not to pick up any audio. God damn it.
For centuries. The second point is that we've seen further and further radicalization on the right, just in the last decade or so.
Okay. Rudyard, I hate you, but listen to me. Brother, I say this out of love. Whatever editing software you're using, which judging from this is Windows Movie Maker from 2010, select everything in your timeline, right click, and you will almost certainly have a noise normalization feature. Click that and it will make everything the same volume. You're welcome.
A large factor is the Leviathan keeps on trying to purge figures that rise to leadership, thus incentivizing even more radical people to rise to leadership since they have no incentive to be moderate. Look at how Trump, Peterson, and Tate have all had legal action done against them and been cancelled. The steam valve has to release, and the less inches the left gives, the more insane the...
Trump, Peterson, and Tate, but you have a picture of Trump, Tate, Elon Musk, and Kanye West. Why?
Reaction's gonna be. Also, even incredibly moderate people get called the worst names like Nazis, so radicalism on the right has been boy who calls wolves by the left. I mean, let's just stop for a second and remember that George...
My dude! You were referring to the left running the show in every major country, in every powerful Western country, and then your slide is a picture of the Israeli Declaration of Independence. To refer to the left. I can't imagine why anybody thinks you're a Nazi. I just blows my mind.
W. Bush was called a Nazi.
Guessing ideologies.
What will the ideology of this new right look like? I'm not going to...
Scientology!
Talk about Europe here just because that's a whole different can of worms, but I think they will have their own right-wing reaction, which I talk...
You think Europe is its own... Europe? Why is Europe its own can of worms? That's where reaction comes from. That's the originary point.
Talk about in my video on Europe. It's interesting to see this play out in real time because I've been predicting what the future of the right might be for years, and as a person who's literally on ground zero seeing this develop, it's fascinating.
Literally on ground zero. He's down there with a microscope watching it grow like a film off the pavement.
To see what predictions play out. And The top thing that I've seen is that this new right will use Christianity as its dominant ideology and centralizing force. As an insider to the internet right-wing world, it's crazy to see how much more conservative the right has gotten in just the last couple years. As just a joke, on my Twitter I said, at this rate, the right's going to start proposing witch burning soon. And about half of my followers said, hell yeah. If the left didn't want to get burnt, they shouldn't act like Satanists. And that's not a good sign. I'm scared since you're taking young men, the most aggressive...
No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're digging that. I don't believe you. I think you're lying.
...demographic in society, and then massively poking their buttons.
But what was that map? It was not of the EU or NATO. Do not ask what is the map on a What If Altus video. It is always not.
Genetically, where they were designed to have the most rage, and then not expecting a bad response. At the same time, our society has thrown away a lot of its powerful value structures that it would use as a way of a moderating force against really horrible actions. You've seen Christianity become a much bigger motivator in the modern right, more so than economics, and I know so many people on the right who have become significantly more religious in the last couple years. And my guess is that this is largely since social justice...
Yeah, exactly. His own audience is not a good sign to him. Maybe that's telling you something, Rudyard.
...and COVID are just so chaotic that people are looking to the religion of their ancestors to provide some degree of psychological stability. There are 4 separate factions on the right, which I will...
The 4 religions of the right. The Libertarians, the Petersonians, the Fundamentalists, and the Red Pill.
...break down as the snake, the lobster, the frog, and the cross. With
these... They're in the wrong order. Don't you have your script when you make these slides?
Snake, that's libertarians, and business conservatives. And they're a very big faction. However, they don't have a shared unifying ideology that will make their young men willing to fight and die for them very strongly. So they'll just become part of another coalition. With the lobster, that's Jordan Peterson and his centrist Christianity, which is much more palatable for a secular audience. And either you will see a more centrist Christianity develop, or you will see a more far-right Christianity. If it manifests with centrist leadership, it will be under an ideology that was invented by Jordan Peterson, even if he might not be the ultimate leading figure.
Jordan Peterson will not actually lead the centrist Christian faction. It will be philosophically based off him either directly or indirectly. His ideology will probably also be edited, adopted, and changed over time to become something else. Dear God, I hope someday this does become a Hearts of Iron 4 mod. This would be fantastic.
Or it'll be someone who comes after Jordan Peterson. Then you have the Red Pill, which is like 4chan and Andrew Tate, and will have a tremendous amount of supporters due to sexually frustrated young men. However, it's too cynical to actually form an ideology around, and so it'll be part of the ruling coalition, but not its leader. Then you have the hard Christian right, which I think has an equal shot of seizing control of the coalition as the Petersonians, and fundamentally, it will be a battle between fundamentalists and the Petersonians for the right.
Oh God, it's the Petersonians. This sunlight, this cloud thing looks like a giant sort of translucent tornado in the background. It's going to be which way, Western man? Petersonians or fundamentalists?
I'm going to make a best and worst case scenario here, both of which I think are plausible. And then through discovering these 2 separate trajectories, we can try to figure out what the right can do in order to not completely...
Doesn't Hearts of Iron 4 have a huge fashy fan base? I mean, it's a World War II era strategy game with a ton of right-wing presuppositions in its system. So I mean, yeah, of course it does.
Completely dishonor itself. In most religions in world history, the dominant principle and thing humans can use to bring out goodness against the chaos of the world is conscious thought. Because without conscious thought, we're slave to our emotions and passions, but with it we can plan around them and then be able to form some kind of order. And the worst position for the right would be it just naturally forming raw chaos without a coherent single ideology and just acting in a vindictive way against everyone it feels wrong against, because if it has a coherent ideology, it can actually hold itself to a moral standard. I mean, an example of this going wrong is the Nazis. The Nazis had no moral standards for themselves and just behaved in the worst way possible.
Well, they did, though. It was just a bad one. It was oriented around an organic notion of the state, and there was an ethos for Nazi Germany. It was just very, very bad. Just like there was an ethos for fascist Italy. They wrote on this. They didn't come into power and wage war just through the sheer power of anger. They had an organizational structure.
Out of a feeling of disgust and revenge. There are two things I find worrying. The first is the right's anti-intellectual culture, which makes the rise of a coherent theory of the world the right could use to find moral standards seem not that great, and also in the previous precedents for conflicts like civil wars, it's normally the most radical faction that wins. And so from that, you would see a highly ethnocentric, aggressive, religious, fanatical faction. You need to have a balance of faith and reason, where faith pushes your soul and gives you the inspiration, and the
Reason, Faith, and the Struggle for Western Civilization by Samuel... What is this?
Generally good direction, while reason...
Samuel Gregg. Hang on. Let's see. Samuel Gregg. Reason, Faith. Here, let's look at a review of this. I'm kind of curious. This is by the Cato Institute. Since so often quote-unquote struggle is shorthand for class struggle without the redundancy, we tend to forget its equally appropriate use in describing efforts to preserve Western civilization, as Australian-born Samuel Gregg does in his book Reason, Faith, and the Struggle for Western Civilization. Research director at the Acton Institute and president of the Philadelphia Society, Gregg succeeded in earning a doctorate in moral philosophy and political economy from Oxford without abandoning either his Catholic faith or his common sense. His long list of erudite publications include Morality, Law, and Public Policy, Economic Thinking for the Theologically Minded, On Ordered Liberty, The Commercial Society, The Modern Papacy, Wilhelm Röpke's Political Economy, and Becoming Europe, Economic Decline, Culture. Okay. Gregg believes the answer lies in understanding the ambidextrous complement of reason and faith, their mutual tempering and reinforcement, aptly captured by John Donne. Reason is our soul's left hand, faith her right. A one-armed pursuit of knowledge is bound to fail, for knowledge presupposes truth, and truth cannot be attained by either pure empirical observation alone or by blind faith in an otherwise irrational world. Faith without reason reduces man to impotence. Conversely, a reason without faith is logically impossible. Ultimately, argues Gregg, it is, quote, the commitment to reasoned inquiry in search of truth that allows mankind to flourish. Okay. The biblical emphasis on freedom is balanced by the insistence that human beings are not God, and they are constantly tempted to use their reason wrongly. Hayek similarly detested the arrogant utopianism, the, quote, fatal and conceit, unquote, of an alleged omniscient technocratic vanguard that presumes to replace individual choice. That's inaccurate. It wasn't because it replaced individual choice. It's because there was a knowledge discrepancy between people at the people who are operating at the distal parts of society, where they're dealing with like the on the ground issues of like industry and war and trade and stuff like that, and the person at the center who is making economic calculations with filtered numbers that are passed through many hands to get to them. It's not actually anything to do with individual choice. These elite deciders are indeed the self-appointed idols of modernity. This is dumb. Anyways.
reason can balance it and temper it with the real outside world. And I worry that a religious fanatical right would lose all reason, because fanatics often win civil wars because they have the highest amount of in-group loyalty, but also they're just not good at understanding how the world really works. And I worry that if fanatics seize control of America, they might hurt genuine religion through making it look corrupt and decadent. And you see this with the Ayatollahs in Iran, you see it with Franco in Spain, the Argentinian and Chilean. It's a pretty common pattern in which religious fanatics seize political power, make the religion itself look corrupt, and then end up making the society far more secular. You need to temper faith with rationality, because that's the only way to keep it real and stay reasonable. Faith can nourish your soul, but at the same time, you need to have rational feedback with the rest of the world. America, even if it becomes a Christian-run nation, still has lots of atheists and agnostics, and you need their buy-in into the system. A couple videos ago, I had a video comparing the often insane similarities between Rome and
Did we cover that one? I feel like we covered this one. I think that was a hot minute ago, though.
America. And if we're looking at that whole comparison, we would be entering the Augustan age pretty soon. And that was when Roman religious conservatives seized control of the society and tried to shove socially conservative legislation, especially aimed at raking the birth rate down the population's throat, but it was just not effective because the population was so secularized that it couldn't go back. The Swiss psychologist and philosopher Carl Jung talked of the Odin switch, or how in Germanic peoples they're normally very law-abiding and orderly, but when they really get pushed, they can go full psycho and return to barbarism. And you saw this with the Nazis, where the Germans are normally a very orderly people, and then they just went full barbarian. And I worry the same thing with the modern American right, where America is still a heavily...
Nazism wasn't disorderly. It was very orderly. That wasn't the problem with Nazi Germany was not that they were an organizational mess. The problem with Nazi Germany was that they were expansionist and eugenic and genocidal. That's the issue with Nazi Germany in a nutshell.
Culturally and genetically Germanic country. So that instinct is still
The Odin switch really, I don't know Jung. I'll just take his word for it.
there. And with the left, they act like a woman who is badgering her husband to make her husband retaliate, and the right does not work in increment like the left. It takes a giant switch. And so I'm worried at a point where the right just goes full barbaric to take revenge against the decade.
He's describing this like it's the last level from Deus Ex Human Revolution. A button will be pushed, and then everybody on the right will suddenly turn into like a violent zombie and will just start spontaneously in concert attacking all of the lefties in their vicinity.
Decades of humiliations by the left. In fact, the only way the left could possibly win the culture wars is because the right has such a quick jump from being passive to being extremely aggressive, and the left, meanwhile, gradually builds up towards more and more aggression, would be for the left to goad the right into a direct rebellion, thus forcing the army, which normally tilts right, but will follow the government and follow orders, to crush the right-wing rebels, thus painting the right as traitors. And we all like to forget this happened on the right, but we have to remember January 6th happened. And January 6th happened before whatever recession and other political problems are going to happen over the next couple years. So if that's the baseline, what could happen next? And I'm worried about some ridiculously retarded...
What are you talking about? They lost an election. They had been agitated because of COVID prevention measures for years by that point.
Actions on the right like that, or launching rebellions that will make the right seem...
That part's probably not wrong, actually. If there was like a right-wing rebellion of some kind right now, that would actually demonize, depending on how it went for them, that would result in the demonization of the right wing in a very sort of general sense that it hadn't been hitherto. You wouldn't be having debates about like equal representation, for example, in academia, with a movement that is openly insurrectionary in that particular way, unless that was attributed to the cause, which it often is. So I don't know.
terrifying and radical to normal American people. Well, the reality is the right just needs to stay still.
Look, I'm trying to throw him a bone, okay? He hasn't had a single, right correct point in 43 minutes.
Keep its values, and then the left in the Leviathan will gradually decompose, thus leaving a more moderate right in power. So the right needs
Will the failed rebellion be good for society in the long term? Probably not. I don't know.
to hold on to its feelings. And I would just say, for the
It
love
depends on what you mean by society, right?
of God, people listening on the right, do not launch a rebellion. Also, the left
No, I can't say that.
is much better at branding. So if the right does something radical, the left will immediately shame the right for it, and the right will face greater consequences for doing...
Historically, the right's much better at branding. That's not true. In fact, even like the famous 3 arrows came after the swastika in an attempt to imitate its success as a logo. Like a lot of political iconography is downstream from innovations that the Nazis deployed on both the right and the left. They were good at what they did. They were good propagandists. There's no question about it. They have one of the most distinct looks of any movement in history.
something insane than the left will, because the left is much more smooth at delivery, while the things the right does are more likely to come across as cringe.
I think it's no, it's not. One of the reasons why we have the meme of leftist audio is because a lot of leftists are really bookish, well-educated, independent scholars who can't figure out the delivery for shit. That's the right, by contrast, is slick and well-moneyed and very high production values. They are owning the propaganda war.
Conspiracy theories are in some ways the ultimate point of faith over reason.
Yeah, but the Nazis stole a ton from the communists. Fair enough.
And that you're not following basic logic, but instead you're saying my worldview must be correct, so I'll have all these bizarre inconsistencies to build up a
COVID-19, of course. This is just dog whistles, the video.
worldview that aligns with what I believe to be true with my faith. And you know your movement is not doing the right thing when you have conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theories allow you to just totally ignore the truth. And once you're ignoring the truth, it cuts yourself off from any stabilizing foundation. You're already seeing the right push conspiracy theories in a really big way, where, just as an example, President Trump and Fox News were pushing the conspiracy theory that the election was faked, which had no evidence. I mean, the right has Congress people like Paul Gosar or Marjorie Taylor Greene that push legitimate conspiracy theories, and said January 6th and the rebellion was good, and on top of that, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, have relationships with literal white supremacists like Nick Fuentes, and the Republican Party's reaction to January 6th, or a storming of the Capitol, was half-heartedly negative at best. As I talked about earlier, there are very stark comparisons now between America and the fall of the late Roman Republic, and in the cycle of civilizations, us and Rome are in the same place. And what happened in Rome? A right-wing Caesar arrived, thus ending the Republic. And I worry that the same thing might happen to us, and it's no surprise that our democratic institutions have grown much weaker, and Trump, even though he had many good qualities, was a populist strongman who contested the election. I think the chances of women's rights being wiped out are decently...
That is an unflattering photo. He looks like he's made of cheese here.
Strongman who contested the election. I think the chances of women's rights being wiped out are decently high. The new right might say things
Oh god, he sounds so optimistic.
like this. Women were most unhappy when they had rights. We gave them everything and they asked for even more. Or the birth rate collapsed so much so that society could no longer function. evolution. As said before, young men look for female approval, and so having a dating market this abysmal, combined with every outlet in society hating masculinity, will probably push a vociferous and incredibly angry reaction. Modern feminism doesn't seem to realize how lucky women are for the rights they have now, and basically no other era in history ever had women's rights. And I'm just shocked in some ways looking at it, because I'm thinking, it looks as if you're trying to goad men to wipe out your rights by just being as annoying as possible. And I don't think that's the intention, but that's what it looks like sometimes. Feminists must realize that men hold all the cards of actual physical force in society, and historically the way women have gotten things from men is by seducing them and making the men fall in love with them and then giving them whatever they want. Because whenever women try to compete directly with men, they have to lose, and I don't know why modern feminism doesn't understand that. I don't think the future right is going to be very racist. And if you look at right-wing platforms today, they often have lots of people of color. Lots of the very most right-wing people I know are ethnic minorities, and most of the most right-wing guys I know are dating Asian or Hispanic women because...
This dude needs sex so badly. No comment.
They're more traditional. However, I do see a great degree of misogyny on the right that is developing, as an entire generation of young men have been vilified by women and are sexually frustrated due to the dating crisis. As Nietzsche once said, "Battle not with monsters, lest ye become a monster, and if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you." I worry that the right will throw away everything that it used to stand for in order to win this conflict. In these last two recent videos, I've talked about how some of the variables stand out for us to have the rise of Caesarism, or for us to lose the Republic. If we want to look to the Romans, their conservative backlash in the late Republic, which is the best parallel to our current era, was able to stabilize things. However, it was at the expense of their freedoms and everything that made them great. However, the same choice stares us down now.
That's a picture from Rome Total War II.
The leaders of whatever movement concentrated among young men are currently watching this video. Listen to my words carefully. You can either succumb to our emotions for no real gain and lose everything we care about. Alternately, no matter how hard it feels, we can think about the things that matter to us and stand for them. Let's not burn our village down to feel its warmth. We might need the houses at some point. What can people on the right do to prevent this horrible reaction and get the best one that I think we can achieve? It's having something that we actively believe in, rather than just hating the left. Hatred can only destroy. However, if you have something that you positively believe in, you can build something new. Values like the truth, which keeps you from being completely unmoored from reality. Values like humility, which prevent you from doing something insanely stupid because you're on an ego trip. And the right needs to dig deep to figure out what values it actively does believe in. And we have to protect our freedoms and protect that America has always been a country where people of differing ideas and backgrounds have been able to live and share together ever since our foundation. One of the best case scenarios is some kind of broad-thinking New Deal scenario, where we have a forward-thinking conservative president who's able to build a coalition together of both people on the right and moderates and even some leftists. This would be a leader of Roosevelt or Lincoln's caliber who can bring America through this turbulent period while maintaining the republic and our heritage and values. I think this scenario is plausible because the most radical factions of the right weren't able to win a severe victory in the midterms, thus meaning the Republican Party is now having a crisis of leadership in which effective and good leadership can rise to the top. America's problems are not that fundamental. Long story short, our economy will probably be in very good shape in a couple decades, and as long as we don't lose the things that matter to us right now, we have very good foundations as a country. A problem with modern American conservatives is that they're too reactive, in that they spend all their time trying to stop what the left is currently doing. Well, the left has a very active moral center, that being diversity and inclusion, and that whole woke prism. You know when you drank way too much and then your friends asked you why you'd said all that retarded shit, or like why you were hitting on a girl that's actually a solid 3, and you think, holy shit, like, I shouldn't have drunk that much. That's the equivalent of what the conservative movement could do, except the stakes are much higher. Let's not have as many drinks, and let's keep responsible friends around us as we're drinking.
Yeah, that's cool. There's no way in hell this guy talked to a girl. I'm gonna be back in like 5 minutes. I'm gonna get more coffee or water or something, and once I've psychically recovered, we'll see what we're doing. I'll be right back. Oh god. Oh god, this is so bad. That was pain. That was actual, unadulterated pain. Oh. Oh man. Oh. Oh, and Somnoir found that photo from earlier. China's quality development is profoundly smooth, steady. Global Times editorial. What's this picture? It's a photo of Xinhua. So it is a photo. Okay. It's not a picture you think of when you think of China. That looks pretty. Oh, wrong button. I'll be right back. Grab coffee. We'll be back soon. Alright, we're back. Oh, excuse me, sorry, I've got the hiccups all of a sudden. So, we're near the end of today's stream. We're going to look at one more thing. Apparently something happened with Vaush and Contrapoints. Let's see what's going on here. I know nothing about this. Somebody mentioned it in chat earlier. So we're going to have to figure out what the hell everybody's talking about before we can actually comment on it. So let's see. Vaush, Contrapoints, Drama 2023. Contrapoints calls out Vaush.
The new one's the on.
Okay, let's see. Xanderhall seems to have a video on it. Let's see how bad this is.
On at 400, and I get a capybara. Nova Rose, how are you? Darsal.
Oh, is this live right? This is live right now. That's no good. Hang on. Can I see Contrapoints on Twitter? I can't imagine why it would be blocked, but she seems to block a lot of people. Let's see. Oh, I see. Jesus Christ, this is long. Okay. So there's a new video she just uploaded 3 hours ago that's an hour and 55 minutes long. The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. Why I Left the Center. Is this about... Vaush isn't referenced in this, is he? There's no transcript yet. Let's see. I don't see anything on Twitter. Maybe Vaush or something. Does anybody know what happened? Chat, help. I have no idea what I'm looking for here. Watch Harry Potter by Balenciaga instead. I saw that already. The tactical sexism stuff is old, though. Did you bring that up again? The Vaush sub posted about the timestamp. Oh, Vaush is talking about it right now. Okay, let's see then. Oh, brilliant! Yeah. Oh, so it is this video. Okay.
I literally can't describe how the rest of her video agrees with everything you're saying now, especially re people deserving. Wow. That's really the end of the video. Like, you know, J.K. Rowling may be wrong, but she's also part of the like group of women who get targeted and hate mongered for. And to demonstrate this, we have Vaush with his devastating blow against feminism. Women be quieter and start apologizing challenge. This is pretty bad.
Is that the call out? Is she just like bringing that up again? Well, she must be.
The bigotry whirlpool. The deeper you go in, the harder it is to leave. For the same reasons that it's hard to...
I have a few issues with Contrapoints. I will have to watch this video on a separate occasion. Vaush was in the wrong, just from a pragmatic standpoint, on the tactical misogyny thing. That was dumb. As well as it just being like a gross thing to do. But my issue with Contrapoints is that she's a political coward. As well as just frankly kind of classist and lazy. Her last video on Envy was appalling. And she has a tendency to say things and then just delete everything very quickly as soon as it's not popular. Because she's not actually all that careful. I think she's just kind of full of herself lately. She produces like maybe 2-3 videos a year. And they're not usually well researched. PhilosophyTube is an eminently better creator at this point. I don't know what to make of this. The witch trials. Okay, what is she saying here? It's an hour and 55 minutes long. Okay, actually, hang on. There should be a timestamp on this, right? 147, so right near the end. 147, huh? Let's see. What does she actually say here? Let's go to, like, 145. Let's get the full context.
But the fertility of confused girls. You know, you might look at these differences of opinion between Rowling and Parker. Little things like pro-feminist versus anti-feminist, left versus right, pro-abortion versus anti-abortion, concern about trans men's fertility versus advocating forced sterilization of trans men, against annihilating women who stand in your way versus pro-annihilating each and every woman who stands in your way. You might look at these differences and expect that these two women would be at odds, but they aren't. Because promoting anti-trans bigotry is a common cause that for both of them trumps all else. In 2020, Posey Parker paid for a poster reading "I Heart J.K. Rowling" to be displayed at a railway station in Edinburgh, and Rowling has tweeted in defense of Parker.
116.43. What's at 116.43?
Till I deal with you, bastard, and I mean to. Dennis, it's time to log off, Gorge. I do wonder, does Dennis threatening to nail people to a wall count as illiberal methods? I guess J.K. Rowling doesn't think so because she's never condemned it. In fact, when Dennis's Twitter suspension ended, she was right there to welcome him back. And she continues to retweet him. I've always been happy to acknowledge that angry trans people on Twitter sometimes take things too far. Things like death threats or misogynistic insults, I don't support that, and I've called it out in the past. Like when the leftist streamer Vaush, drama alert, who is not trans, tweeted at J.K. Rowling, "Women be quieter and start apologizing challenge."
That's ironic, you idiot. That's the point. There's not a joke if it's not ironic. Oh my god.
I called him out, tweeting, "Doing edgy ironic misogyny while defending trans..."
But the joke is that he doesn't believe that. That's the point. The joke is not a joke unless he deliberately intends the opposite implication of his actual position. That's the point. Like, here's the problem with this. And it goes both ways. Vaush defending it to the death was stupid and selfish. But also, using this as a vehicle to attack Vaush was stupid and selfish. Because what it actually meant was that you were able to divert criticism from J.K. Rowling inwards towards critiques of J.K. Rowling. So now everybody's fighting about this, and J.K. Rowling gets to sit comfortable and pretty while the reasonable good ones take her side for the time being, and the opposition just kind of implodes. That goes both ways. Like, you were all stupid about this. Every single one of you. Sunday, I was only joking, it's not offense. I'm not defending it. It was dumb. And it sent an irresponsible message, but that's beside the point. Like, just from the standpoint of, like, just political capital, it was so stupid on everyone handled that so stupidly. Vaush especially, by the way. Vaush was stupid here. Stupid and arrogant and selfish. There's no argument for me. But so was Contra. Like, do you remember that envy video where she was going on and on about how the left just envies the upper classes and that's why they're mad about rich people having, like, parties during COVID?
People magnifies the grain of truth in what TERFs say about there being misogyny in trans activism. I tweeted that because I recognize that if people who are claiming to speak for you are doing so in a misogynistic way, and if you let that slide, you're going to wake up one day to find that you're in a misogynistic movement. Of course, Vaush took the criticism really well, explaining that actually,
this is a year old. Why are we still talking about this? That also doesn't follow, by the way. I'm sorry. No, that was a stupid joke by Vaush, but Vaush making that joke does not entail that the movement itself, whatever that's referring to, Vaush is a single content creator. The movement itself will become misogynistic. That doesn't follow at all. That doesn't make sense. That makes sense if the center of gravity is actually in like a misogynistic space. So, for example, when right-wingers make misogynistic jokes, they'll make those jokes in conjunction with people who really believe that, and then a part of the joke will become, ho ha ha, we both really believe that, and then eventually they will fade into each other, since they're both trying to defend an essentially patriarchal form of society. But this doesn't really follow at all. Especially since the category of woman would be directly problematized by what Vaush is defending here against J.K. Rowling. It gets worse. Okay, you know what? This thing's an hour and 55 minutes long. I'm tired. I wanted water and I ended up with another glass of whiskey, so I'm worn out from this. We're gonna save this. And what's my schedule this week? We need to be careful with how we handle this. We're gonna do this on Saturday. That's what we're gonna do. We are going to do this on Saturday. And we're going to go through the whole thing with a fine-tooth comb. She claims Vaush doesn't care about trans issues. Guys, this is 2 hours long. This is going to be a full stream, and it's going to be a long stream. Yeah, fuck it. Okay, you know what? We're gonna bump. This is what we're gonna do. This is what we're gonna do. Okay. Tomorrow, we're going over the Minds Fest panel with Wick. On Wednesday. Do I want to bump everything? Okay. On Wednesday, we are going to go over this. She claims Vaush doesn't care about trans issues, which is a bald-faced lie. That makes me mad. Actually, I will say this, okay? Pig-headed idiot though he is, Vaush is one of the very few content creators in his position who hasn't actually betrayed the trans community for easy clout. Maybe there are dishonorable reasons for that I'm not considering, but like that merits notice. A lot of other people are doing the exact opposite. That's a big deal. All right. Okay. Here's what we're going to do, okay? And I actually want to wait a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Let's minimize this. Let's maximize me. Here's what I want to do. I want to see Vaush's response, and I want to have this in juxtaposition with it. Or strike that and reverse it. I want to go through this, and then go through Vaush's response to it after the fact. And then see if there's a reply back. Because there will be a record by that point. And then we'll have something to analyze. That'll be interesting. It'll have unfolded a bit more. So I think we're going to do this on Saturday, once this has had a week to kind of like ferment. And then we will go through this, however many hours it takes. 5+ hours. God. That's what we're going to do. Okay? Sundeck show tomorrow. We are going over the Minds Fest panel, which is going to be pain, but it's going to be fun at least. Because the last... Oh god, what the fault is so painful. Ugh. And then we're heading into a theory-heavy week, which will be capped off with this Natalie and Vaush shit. So that's great. If you appreciate what I do, I have a Patreon linked in the description. That is the best way to support the channel because they take a much smaller percentage of what you donate than YouTube does. But thanks everybody for watching. That is also supporting the channel in a big way. I will see you all tomorrow. We will be on with Wick. We're going to be going over the Minds Fest panel. We're going to be doing some more Resident Evil. I will be having water instead of 3 consecutive glasses of bourbon. Ciao.